Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit, Neye Ojira da Medinde Ojirafo, Kwesi Radnem Bata Akan, Akamumain Amaruka Etibimu Ojirafo. That means greetings to all Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit people, meaning Africans, Black people. Today is Ojira Day, Purification Day. My name is Ojirafo Kwesi Radnem Bata Akan, Ojirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yedase, we thank you once again for tuning in to the show. We are going to place some links in the chat room, links to documents, some of our publications that we will be touching on tonight. And there are a couple of them. These particular documents are articles that we have published. And then we also have one of our publications, one of our books. So, putting those in the chat room right now. If you are on the phone line, you have a question or a comment, hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you are in the chat room, you would have to log in as a user in the chat room in order to interact in the chat room. If you don't have a username in Blog Talk, you can sign up for one very quickly, and then you can log in and interact in the chat room. So what we have, before we get into it, a couple of announcements we have. This is week number 5 of our akom economic development model. We're going to be talking about akom and its different facets tonight. But akom economic development model. We'll put the link in the chat room right now. And I want to make sure everybody, we have one individual saying they couldn't hear in the chat room, so you might have to log out and log back in. If anybody else is having an issue in the chat room, let us know. Okay, so we're putting a link to the akom economic development page on our website. So we have a publication, akom economic development model, where we delineate our specific model for economic development. Our strategy is to starve the beast and feed the pride. So we make an assessment on a weekly basis, determine what funds we have wasted or would have possibly potentially wasted with the white snare offspring, take those funds, starve that white beast, and reallocate those funds to the business of the week. We are targeting one Black Afurakani Afuraitkaitnit business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks, targeted for capital infusion. We are in week number 5, which began a couple of days ago. The business of the week is Onk Services, owned by Coach Bilal Sankofa. We had Coach Sankofa on our Blog Talk Radio program, Egua Marketplace, in the past. And when you go to the akom page, you will see the link to his information. You will see the link to his contact information. You will see the link also to the interview, the 2-hour interview we did. We talked about his business, we talked about his service, talked about his service to the community, his philosophy behind serving the community, rooted in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, and ancestral culture, and so forth, educational institution, transforming lives, and so forth. That is the kind of in-the-trenches work that he is engaged in. So his business is the business of the week for this week, in our 5th week of akom. Our first business was Nkingu Health, owned by Dr. Afivi Adiro, who's a naturopathic physician, and we asked everyone to target and reallocate funds, starve the white beast, take those funds that we may waste at McDonald's or Starbucks or whatever on a weekly basis, take those funds and reallocate them to the business of the week. The second business for the second week was our Akongwa Suyadain, our institution of learning, healing, training, employment, and entrepreneurship. We asked everyone to support that business endeavor. The third business of the week was Wahimi Masood Productions, owned by Dr. Iya Ajua. We ask everyone to support that business in the third week. Then last week was our fourth week. The business of the week was Iya Naila Sankofa. Her business is Tiwan Tiwa Etibimine Village, and also Sankofa Safo and so forth. And we ask everyone to support that business for the week. And this week is week number 5. And again, it's Ankh Services owned by Coach Bilal Sankofa. And you will see all of the information on the akom page on our website. So when you go to that link, you see the akom economic development model. You can download that model and read it. Of course, it's a free download, the publication. You can see our 4-part series that we did on Blog Talk Radio. We saved them as videos on YouTube, so you can click on the 4 videos where we go into detail, delineating and explicating the model in its various facets, parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. Each one of those videos is about 2 hours each, going into detail about that information. And then you can look at the link of the various businesses that we are targeting. The list will continue to increase. We have, again, 14 businesses on the list. They will increase. You see the business, the name of the business. You see the link to the business's website where you can make contributions. You can support their services, make donations to their businesses, organizations, institutions. You'll also see a link to the interview that we did with each one of these businesses, 2 hour interviews where they sat with us and talked about their service to the community. So this is week number 5, so please go to the akom, go to Ankh Services, and support that black business. What we are doing is tangibly reallocating funds from the white Narrow Springs, starving the beast to feed the pride. We are tangibly supporting, by the end of 52 weeks, of course, who have supported as a community. Everybody who's participating, you get this information, you share it with your contacts on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and so forth, and the more people who participate, the more black businesses that will be served. And when we reallocate, spend $5 or $10 a week that you actually waste with white businesses receiving products that are actually unnecessary or unhealthy or whatever, you can reallocate those funds, reallocate that $10 and make a $10 donation to the business of the week, the educational institution of the week, the organization of the week that is actually serving the black community, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit community. If 1,000 people do that, of course, then $10,000 will have been reallocated away from white businesses who don't need our funds, period, and directed to a black business who can definitely use an infusion of $10,000 in capital or more in order to expand their business, keep their business open, hire one or more of our people in the community so that they can have employment and also feed themselves, feed their families, take care of their responsibilities and so forth while serving the community. So this is what we are doing, and we're going to get into more detail about that tomorrow on Egua Marketplace Day. So that's the akom model. Okay, give us 1 second real quick, and then we're going to get started. All right, so that was that piece. That was only an announcement that we had right now. So if you go to the first link that we posted, if you go to the second link that we posted, the second link is to our article, ODWIRA and Aquamumine, so it says ODWIRA_Aquamumine, Amaruka, Etifimu. And that is, if you go to that link, we're going to start with that particular publication. So the name of the broadcast and what we do, just so you understand, we have 3 shows a week. We just talked about our Egua Marketplace show on Awukuda Wednesdays, where we bring on black businesses, organizations, institutions who are serving the community and also transmitting and transferring our ancestral values through their service to the community, through their businesses, organizations, and institutions. We have them come on and showcase who they are so that our people can be made aware of that and support these businesses. So that's what we do on Eguada Wednesday Marketplace Day. That's one of our shows. We also have on Joda Mondays, we have Abosom and Nananom, Ancient, Authentic, Akan, Ancestral Religion, where we go into detail about various aspects of the Akan expression of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African ancestral. Number one, we are Akan, but at the same time, there's a great deal of misinformation regarding Akan philosophy, cosmology, and so forth coming not only from this hemisphere, but also from individuals on the continent who have been infected with white culture in general, and as well as white pseudo-religion, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, as well as Hinduism and other pseudo-religious practices and pseudo-philosophy. And therefore, that misinformation has been woven into the fabric of the culture, and now when people seek to, gain knowledge of that culture, of our tradition, they are very often, most often, misinformed, either given misinformation or very limited information because people have been so infected. So we go into detail about ancient, authentic Akan ancestral religion based on the publications that we have released. We have 16 books out. We have over 60 articles. To date, we have 102 broadcast archives of our Blog Talk Radio shows, as well as a number of other videos as well. So we go into detail about this information to give clarification on Akan culture, cosmology, ancestral religion, and so forth. So that's what we're doing. In fact, we're in the midst of a multi-part series on the Abosom, the deities that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which animate and govern our 7-day week. And we just did part 10 yesterday. Part 11 is coming Joda Monday. On Abinada Tuesdays, we have, which is today, of course, is ODWIRA. ODWIRA means purification. In the Akan language, ODWIRA means also a celebration of purification. So many Akanfo, we call our New Year's celebration, which happens around September on the continent between August, September, October. It shifts. New Year celebration, 7-day celebration in many areas. It's called ODWIRA purification. Here in Akwamumai, Amarukai, Tifimuni, Akwamu Nation in North America, our 7-day ODWIRA observance, New Year observance, occurs between September 16th and the 22nd, or September 17th through the 23rd. It is calibrated according to the Atimet, or autumnal equinox, the first day of fall, that is our New Year's Day, and the 6 days leading up to that, the first 6 days of observance. The 7th day is our New Year's Day, and the last day of our observance, that is our New Year's Day. So September 22nd was actually our first day of our new year of 13,015. Of course, we don't track time based on a fictional cartoon character, Jesus, who never existed at all, so we don't use 2015. We are in the midst of a 26,000-year astronomical cycle, which is measurable. We're in the midst of that cycle, hence the years beginning with 13,000. So we're in 13,015, which began on September 22nd. So ODWIRA means purification and also means celebration of purification. In the language of ancient Kemet, which you will see on the front page, the promo for this particular broadcast, you see the images in the slideshow. You see we show the Medutu, the hieroglyphs, spelling out the term Jida, and in ancient Kemet, it also means purification. It also means a celebration of purification because it's the same term from the same people. The Akan language, as well as many others across the continent, are directly derived from the ancient language, our ancestral language of ancient Kanat, Kanit, Nubia, and Kemet. So, of course, the terms are the same. And, of course, we worship the same divinities by the same names, different spiritual organs, the Ba, the Ka, and the Aku, and so forth. We have all of those spiritual organs within the Akan language as well. We did a 7-part series on the different spiritual organs within the bodies of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. You can download that entire 7-part series directly from this Blog Talk channel as well. So we just want to show that. So ODWIRA means purification, and what we talk about is ODWIRA operationalizes Nananom. Purification operationalizes Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion, or African Ancestral Religion. No matter what expression it takes, whether it's the expression of the Akan, Yoruba, Eve, Vodun, Basa, Baluba, Bakongo, whoever it is, Maasai, Fula, in the authentic practice, Jida, or purification, operationalizes Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion. In essence, Nananom, which is our term for Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, meaning African Ancestral Religion, is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities that we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions in harmony with divine law every moment of every day. And through ritual, we restore balance to our lives by rejecting those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our lives at any given time. Incorporation of divine law and the restoration of divine balance, those are the expansive and contractive poles, like breathing, expansion and contraction. The expansive and contractive poles of Nananom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion, and those principles are translatable and transferable to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people and expressions of Ancestral Religion wherever we are in the world. So, Jida, or Ojida, purification, operationalizes that process. Through purification, then we can move forward to incorporate law and restore balance to our lives. So this is what we deal with. Tonight we're going to deal with, the title of the show, Conjuration-Experience as Key to Understanding Ancestral Religion. Very often, people will put forth false notions because they don't understand cosmology, they don't understand who we are as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, not even understanding the nature of the term Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnit, and of course we have our book, our publication, Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnit, the origin of the term Africa. We'll put a link to that in the chat room. We are the first to show conclusively that the term Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnit comes directly from our ancient ancestral language of ancient Hanit and Kemet. We show the actual Medutu, the hieroglyphs that spell out the term in the context, not just spelling out the term, but in the context of the creation of the first landmass of the planet Earth. Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnit, we are children of Ra and Ra'et. So when we understand who we are, understand our relationship to the Abosom, which is the akom term for the forces in nature, the divinities, our relationship to the Nananom Nsamanfo, which is the akom term for spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, and our relationship to Nyamewa, Nyame, the great mother and the great father, the supreme being, called Amenet and Amen in ancient Kemet. We understand that relationship, how we attune ourselves and align ourselves with Nyamewa, Nyame, the great mother, the great father, the supreme being, through the agency of the Abosom and the Nananom Nsamanfo, of the deities and the ancestral spirit. The great mother and the great father is the great divine body that permeates creation. The organs within that great divine body are the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the divinities, the Ntoru, Ntorotu, misnomer, Neteru, and Netutu, the deities, the spirit forces that animate creation. They're the organs, the smaller bodies within the great divine body, and then the cells of those organs are plant life, animal life, mineral life, and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life, and Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life only. So we are the cells of those organs. And when we serve those organs as cells, we serve the great divine body. We serve the Abosom, of whom we are a component part, our parent divinities, and we're serving the great whole, just like your heart cells, when they serve heart functions and support heart functions, they're supporting you as a being in general. When your liver cells serve liver functions, serve the parent organ of which they are a component part, they're serving the whole body at the same time. So we have a function. We have a nature. We have a function that's related to why we came into the world, what our function and execute is, and the kind of energy we've been given to execute that function in the world by the Supreme Being. So when we have that understanding, then we can move forward with Jida, with purification, reincorporate ancestral religion into our activity consciously. There's misinformation being propagated that stalls or stymies some of our people when they come in contact with individuals who appear to know something about ancestral culture, know something about ancestral religion, know something about cosmology or philosophy and truth theory and so forth, and they give you misinformation, and they make you believe that you can't connect with your ancestral religion unless you go through certain processes that are actually have something to do with the whites and their offspring. That's the key. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through this information. We're going to start off with the article that we published. We published it because people had asked us information about our background and how we came to gather this kind of information. So the way we gave some basic information about our background, but the way we gave the information is also showing the same thing that we have done is the same thing that every Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person, number one, has the capacity to do, but also as an adult, you have the responsibility to do. So it's nothing unusual about the way we gather information, and we go into detail about that in the context of talking about what we are doing. So some people will say, for example, first you must need to, you have to study the language of Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnit, of the specific groups that you come from and so forth, so that you study the language and understand the way that people were thinking. Then you can understand the cosmology. And until you learn the language, then you really won't understand the philosophy, the cosmology, or the ancestral religion, and you're going to have wrong ideas and you won't be able to move forward. So it is key that you understand the language first, before you do anything else. Of course, that's inaccurate. Number one, what happens to a person born in Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnit, who's born deaf? Now, they can't communicate with the Supreme Being. They can't communicate with the Abosom. They can't communicate with the Nananom Nsamanfo because they're deaf. Of course, that's inaccurate. In fact, they have special protection from certain classes of Nananom Nsamanfo because they have that particular condition. So they're protected, just like you protect a child if they're born with a certain disability in your family, then you protect them to make sure that nobody tries to take advantage of them. They have extra protection beyond what you would give to the regular children. You protect all your children. If one has a disability, you're going to give more attention to that one to make sure they're protected. The same is true of the Nananom Nsamanfo. So if someone is born deaf, they can't communicate, they can't speak. Does that mean they can't engage the ancestral religious process? They can't align with their own Okra? Do they have a Okra? Do they have a soul? Of course they do. Do they have a Bra? Do they have a divine living energy within them? Of course they do. Do they have Abosom that were assigned to them pre-incarnation? Of course they do. Are they connected to Nyamewa Nyame? Of course they are. So it has nothing to do with language in and of itself. So that's the first thing. We're not saying you don't learn the language. Of course we do that, but we're talking about process, and we're talking about what is primary. So the second thing is, if learning the language of the culture was key first, so that people can understand the culture, and once you fully understand the language and you studied the language and learned it for a number of years and really understand what is being taught and you can speak it fluently and so forth, so fluently that some people will believe that that is your first language. If that was the case, that studying the language in detail was key, then every single Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person on the continent today will be fully immersed in their ancestral culture. There are many people, for example, in Ghana, Ivory Coast, the only language that they speak is the Tree language, the akom language. They never learned English. The only language they speak is their own. They live on their own land. They've never lived anywhere outside of the continent ever. They never traveled outside of their country. They farm, they draw water, they tap palm wine, they engage in all the various activities within their cultural milieu. That's all they know. And they speak the language fluently. And some even go to their own universities within Ghana to go into deeper studies of the language and become teachers of the language and will get a PhD. But then they believe that God is a white man named Jesus. You have millions of people who are Christians, and then you have a handful who are Muslims and other people involved in other nonsense. So if the language in and of itself was enough, all of those people, it would be impossible for them to be Christians, it would be impossible for them to be Muslims and so forth, because the language in and of itself, just knowing the language and being part of the culture, that would be enough for them to always be in harmony with divine order and fully understand their culture. But you will engage many of those individuals, millions of them, and they believe that the fictional cartoon character would never exist, that Jesus is a real character. And when you talk to them about ancestral religion and culture and communicating with divinities, they think that's evil and of the devil and so forth. They've been brainwashed thoroughly on the continent. So their knowledge of the language has not saved them from that brainwashing. So when people come along and say, well, you have to, if you don't understand the language, then there's no way you can understand the culture. Totally inaccurate. They say, well, if you, learn ritual songs, ritual dances, ritual prayers, divination, initiations, you have to go through all these various things, ritual adornments, even ritual preparation of food and so forth. You need to learn these various things in order to really be, immersed in the culture so you can understand it. However, the people who are living on the continent right now betray that logic or that illogic, because if that was the case, then all of them will be 100% on point. They will be teaching the culture pure, authentic. None of them will be Christians, Muslims, Hebrews, pseudo-Hebrews, pseudo-Jews or whatever, which is another fictional group. There were no ancient Hebrews ever. So their logic is betrayed. It's illogic and it's betrayed by what's really happening. So the key we want to talk about is the only way to understand ancestral religion, it begins with, it is rooted in experience. And we're talking about conjuration, invoking the Abosom, evoking the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, aligning yourself with Nyame Wa Nyame, the Supreme Being. We have that capacity, we have that responsibility. It was not taken from us because we were forced to migrate through the Musuo Kesie, the great perversity, the enslavement era, and forced, of course, into the Western Hemisphere. Before you enter into the womb, you are assigned by Nyame Wa Nyame certain forces in nature that govern your head and those who govern your patriclan and matriclan and so forth. And you're ushered into a specific womb, specific incarnation connected to one of your descendants by your Nsamanfo, your ancestresses and ancestors, and you carry that ancestral energy with you as well, and that connection to them, that ancestral family as well. So that is with you no matter where you are born on earth. So we have the capacity to engage our culture. We have the responsibility to engage our culture. And it begins first with experience, and that conjuration and communication, provocation of the Supreme Being and the Abosom and Nsamanfo, that's the key, experience. And we begin to have these experiences when we are children. It doesn't matter where we have been forced to migrate in the world, we begin to have these experiences as children. We need to properly contextualize these experiences, recognize that they are part and parcel of our culture and rooted in our culture. And once we understand that in the proper context, then we can begin to fully engage these experiences and expand our practice. Then we can study language as well and so forth and get into more things. But the first thing is experience. Just like someone who is physically deaf, we're born culturally deaf. We don't know the language. We can't speak it. But just like a deaf person has protection from family members because they're protected because of their disability, and they have protection from the Nananom Nsamanfo. People say they have blessings from the Nsamanfo, and if somebody tries to attack that person, not only the community will attack them physically, but the Nsamanfo will attack them as well. We have been born culturally deaf in this part of the world. Therefore, we have an increased protection from the Nananom Nsamanfo. They have an increased scrutiny, intensely seeking to infuse information about the culture and direct us so we can get back on track and overcome this temporary deficit, this temporary cultural deafness. And it is through our direct blood ancestresses and ancestors that we accomplish that. So let's get into this first article. Put the link back in the chat. We'll put the link back in the chat room. And again, we're not going to read the whole thing. The article is ODWIRA for an akom mind. People asked us about our approach and how we learned about culture, got involved in culture. So we talked about that, but we talked about it in the context of reclaiming culture and showing that everything that we are doing is what all of our people can be doing and have the responsibility to do within your own clans as well. First, the Akwamu is an Akan ethnic designation. All ethnic designations are spirit genetic. Akwamu Mine Amaruka Etikimu is the Akwamu nation in North America. We spell it slightly different based on the way it's spelled in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphs. Same sound, of course. Akwamu is spelled slightly different in general by people on the continent. We chose to spell it slightly different. On one hand, based on the fact that we've translated and found that term in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet. We have an article, The Origin of the Name Akwamu, from Kanit and Kemet. We published that. It's on the website, and we read from that last week. But also, so part of that had to do with us going to our ancient ancestral culture. Akan people coming from ancient Kanat, Nubia, migrating eventually to the west to reestablish the Akana or Ghana Empire, and eventually migrating south and reestablishing Akana civilization in the Forest Belt regions of Ghana and Ivory Coast, today's borders, about 1,000 years ago. And then some of us, as Akan people, being taken from there and forced to North Central South America and the Caribbean during the enslavement era. So we're talking about the same people. So we go back to our ancient ancestral culture, show that that term Akwamu as well as Akan exists, same meaning. So we spell it slightly different. It also shows that we are Akwamu in the Western Hemisphere in North America, which we are related, of course, to our people on the continent, but we're also a different group. We have different experiences, and the way we move is different because we have experiences here, and we incorporate those experiences having lived, lost, quote-unquote, the culture consciously and reclaimed it, recognizing who our enemies are in detail, recognizing the value of divine law and divine hate, the balance, expansive and contractive balance of divine order, which are the two poles of divine order, divine law or love and divine hate. We incorporate all that information into who we are because we've learned that, reaffirmed that, and we proudly proclaim that. So we are a different group. We are Akwamu ethnically, genetically, genetically, and so forth, just like the Akwamu on the continent, but we also have our own personality. So we're not up under individuals on the continent. We are our own group. So this is why we spell Akwamu differently. And it's the same thing with everybody else here in the Western Hemisphere. If you find out that you are Yoruba, if you find out that you are Ede, if you find out that you're Fon, if you find out that you are Bakango, if you find out that you are Fula, you have become your own group, your own expression of these things here based on our experiences. You are your own independent entity. We can have diplomatic relations with our blood relatives on the continent, but it's not a parent-child relationship. It's not that they're superior, we're children, we're inferior, and we come up under them. It doesn't work that way. We are on the same level. They're not our parents, they are our colleagues. So they need to understand that, and we need to understand that, so we won't be taken advantage of and operate in a foolish manner. Now, we talk about Akwamu is an Akan designation. The Akwamu people are a subgroup of the larger Akan group, just like there's Asante and Fanti and so forth. So it's an ethnic designation. All authentic ethnic designations are spirit genetic. All Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, meaning Africans and black people, children and adults, have the capacity to communicate with our Nsamanfo, our Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, African or black ancestresses and ancestors. Thus, when our parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts transition via death to Asamando, the ancestral realm. They continue to communicate with us, watch over us, guide us. Such ancestral spirit communication occurs through various non-ritual and ritual media. So first we deal with the non-ritual media of communication. Non-ritual media of communication include our Nsamanfo, our ancestresses and ancestors communicating with us by making themselves present in our dreams, providing us with critical and often detailed guidance on important matters. Our Nsamanfo also communicate with us via our 7 spiritual senses. In varying capacities, different Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit children and adults, and that's key, have the ability to see beyond the physical, and we have a separate article that we're going to deal with in nkom and the 7 senses, but this is a summary. Children and adults have the ability in varying capacity to see beyond the physical, which is spiritual sight, often called clairvoyance, hear beyond the physical, clairaudience, feel entity presence, energy, and touch beyond the physical, which they call clairsentience, smell and taste beyond the physical, clairalience and clairgustance, experience a shift in the time-space continuum or a shift in equilibrium or balance beyond the physical, what we call clairtimiance and clairequilibrance. The 5 senses, sight and smell and taste and touch and hearing and so forth, there are 2 more senses, which is sense of time and the sense of balance. Your sense of balance is key to your functioning every single day. And your sense of time, the time-space continuum and so forth is key to your functioning on a daily basis. White's and Offspring promoted the idea we only have 5 senses. That's never been accurate. So we talk about those 7 senses, and we have a separate article dealing with that, and we're going to get into that after we deal with this one. But we just summarize it here. So we can see beyond the physical, hear beyond the physical, taste, touch, smell, feel beyond the physical, experience the time continuum beyond the physical, shift in equilibrium and balance beyond the physical, and so forth. Thus, in varying degrees, especially beginning in early childhood, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people have the ability to see the spirits of the Nsamanfo, our ancestresses and ancestors, as they show themselves to us on occasion. Hear the Nsamanfo speak to us on occasion. And depending on who they are, if they're most recently departed, they will very often speak to us in English. But anybody beyond that, they will speak to us in their ancestral language. And when they speak it, typically we will understand. Even if we don't know the language, we know what they're trying to convey because it's coming from their spirit. So they'll speak to us on occasion. We can hear them. We can feel the touch and presence of the Nsamanfo around the house and in nature on occasion. Experience unique and peculiar smells or tastes of the energy of the Nsamanfo when they are present among us. Have time-space shifting experiences, losing track of time when the Nsamanfo communicate with us. Experience a shift in our ability to maintain equilibrium when the Nsamanfo are present. Example, some people's bodies will rock or they will experience dizziness when the Nsamanfo make their presence felt. The Nsamanfo also communicate with us through our achinebois, which is the Akan term for animal totem. Certain animals, therefore, function as messengers of the Nsamanfo, appearing at critical times in our lives. The Nsamanfo seed intuitions into our spirit, help us to overcome illness, warn us of danger, inform us of details on subjects that we would otherwise not know, urge us to call a friend, family member, or community member when that person is going through a trying situation, give us messages to forward to friends, family members, or community members who have been praying for an answer to a difficult problem, often praying to a fictional God like Jesus, Allah, Yahweh, Brahma, etc. But they're praying, but the Nsamanfo will go ahead and make sure they get what they need to get so that they can survive and be protected and safe and so forth, so that eventually, as they continue to communicate with them or send other people to them, to snap them out of that brainwashing, at length they will find out all the time that they were praying to the fictional cartoon character, it was really the Nsamanfo who was making sure their prayers were answered, just like a child, quote-unquote, praying to Santa Claus for gifts and so forth, and they received the gifts on December 25th. At some point, the parents, even though they were foolish enough to tell their children that there is a Santa Claus, a cracker coming in the house in the middle of the night bringing gifts, at some point they will tell the children, actually, it was us. Santa Claus doesn't exist. And the same thing is true when our people are blindly following these fictional cartoon character deities who never existed. There was never a Jesus. There was never an Allah, Yahweh, Brahman. There was no black Jesus. There was no white Jesus. There was no black Muhammad. There was no white one. There was no Buddha, black or white. And, of course, in our Kukutuntum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction publication, we prove that these characters never existed in detail, conclusively, and we show the actual divinities from ancient Kemet from whom their titles were corrupted to manufacture these cartoon characters. So these various things that we engage in when we communicate, the Nsamanfo communicate with us through the 7 spiritual senses, through dreams. They see intuitions into us. They direct us, support us, and so forth. And the Achineboa, the animal totems, to communicate with us and so forth. This is happening from the time we are children, and we go forward. In truth, it is the Abosom, the divine spirit forces in creation, and the persons in Nsamanfo who hear their prayers and direct our Nsamanfo to give the message of truth to them. The message is the solution that they prayed for, which is expressive and impressive of divine order. When we talk about divine order, again, there are 2 poles. The expansive pole is law, which is the same word as love in our traditional languages, and the contractive pole is divine hate. Through law, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with order, and through hate, we reject and repel those and destroy those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject and repel in order to maintain balance within ourselves, within our community, within our society, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. So those are the expressive and impressive, expansive and contractive poles of divine order, divine law, and divine hate. There are male and female divinities of law, which is Ma'al and Ma'at, called Amame and Abam in Akom culture, and Edun and Odu in the Yoruba tradition, and there are Abosom of divine hate. Arubekudet and Sechima, Sekmet in ancient Kemet, Benna and Abena in Akan, Ogun and Iyami Abeni in the Yoruba tradition, and so forth. So there are divinities of law, divinities of hate, and other non-ritual media of nkom, ancestral communication, are only heightened when we engage in ritual practices such as Oshue, Akom, Asal, Ejun, Mpaiba, Aforeba, Adebisa, which is libation, spirit possession, ritual dance, ritual song, ritual prayer, ritual offering, divination, and more. As it is with the Nsamanfo, so it is also with the Abosom, the divine spirit forces in creation, the deities, the goddesses and gods, all Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit, and only Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit have Abosom that are connected to us by Kra Nemoja, soul and blood. The Abosom, therefore, remain connected to us and our families transcarnationally, from one incarnation to the next. It is the Nananom Nsamanfo, the spiritually cultivated class of Nsamanfo, who are our family connection to the Abosom. Now, so the first thing we need to get clear, the Nsamanfo, as well as the Abosom, communicate directly to us through our 7 spiritual senses, children and adults. So from the time that we are children, and when you reflect, when you go back to your childhood, you began to recognize when you had some clairvoyant experiences, seeing beyond the physical, clairaudience experiences, hearing beyond the physical, clairailience, clairgustance, smelling, tasting beyond the physical, when certain spirits will come forward, or some people have clairsentient experiences. They'll feel a presence in the room, hot energy moving through the room, or cool, get very cold when an entity moves across and they can feel it. clairequilibrance, dizziness coming over the person, losing their balance when the spirit moves through. Clairtimiance, the shift in the time continuum. All of a sudden, a great deal of time has passed, and you haven't realized it because you were in a spiritual state and there was some communication going on. That happens from the time we are children through adults. Before we learn anything about language, ancestral languages, before we engage in libation, before we engage in ritual prayer, before we engage in anything, we already are receiving communication because this is inborn, it is innate. Our connection to the forces of nature is inborn. Our connection to the Nananom Nsamanfo is inborn. Our connection to the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, is inborn, innate, intrinsic. So once we contextualize these experiences that we are having and recognize who is who, then we can move forward and enhance that non-ritual media of communication with the ritual media of communication, libation, shrines, ritual song, ritual dance, and so forth, and the divination, these various things. But even these communications are a form of oracular inquiry as well. So we are engaged in rudimentary divination just by communicating in this fashion and learning directly from the Nsamanfo and the Abosom and so forth, as well as animal totems showing up at specific junctures in life. And when you begin to reflect about different things, when certain animals have shown up at certain times, then you begin to recognize that Nsamanfo were there communicating all along, ever since childhood. So let's move forward with that information. So we say all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Africans, and only Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit also have an Okraa, a portion of the Okraa of Inyame, God, and Inyamewa, goddess. This means we have a soul, a divine function. The term is Okra, male in Yakan language, Okraa, or Okrawa, female, called Ka and Kaed in ancient Kemet. A soul, a divine consciousness. Dwelling within us, it is a portion of the soul or divine consciousness of the Supreme Being. It dwells within our heads as our spiritual brain. Okra is the masculine name, or Okraa with two A's, or Okrawa, the feminine name, is our soul. It is our personal Abosom, personal divinity, which always guides us and pulls us to operate in harmony with divine order, the force that dwells in the head region. The Nananom Nsamanfo and Abosom guide and empower us to align and realign ourselves with that guidance or pull. For it is Nyamewa Nyame, the Mother and Father Supreme Being, who guide, pull us through the Okrawa. It is up to us to follow that guidance or pull. This is the basis of spirituality. For Nanasom, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion is the ritual mechanism whereby we incorporate that which we need to harmonize with the pull of the Okrawa, the pull of Inyamewa Nyame, Nsheshe, divine order, and restore balance to our lives when imbalance occurs. Moreover, all Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnit, and only Afuraitkaitnit, Africans, black people, have the Okra, called Ba in ancient Kemet, Bra in Akom, but also Ba in Akom as well. The divine life energy of Nkom and Nkom, the creator and creatress, they are called Ra and Ra'et in ancient Kemet. One of the titles of Ra in Kemet is Ra-Kun, and that becomes Yang-Ku, and Dan-Ku, and Nyang-Ku, and Nyang-Kun-Pong, which is Pong means great, but also means circular. Nang-Ku is the great serpent, so it's the great circular serpent. That is Nyang-Kun-Pong, as well as Nyang-Kun-Tong, that's creator and creatress. That is Ra and Ra'et. The Ba, the divine living energy of Ra and Ra'et, the great spirit that animates all created entities in creation, the divine living energy that permeates all plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life, the divine living energy of them moves within us. It's called the Ba and the Ba'et, Bra and Akom. We have that within us, which allows each of us as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people to consciously and energetically link with the Abosom, the spirit forces in creation, and activate our inherited energy complex to execute our divinely allotted function, Okra and Okraa, in the world. Meaning, everything has electromagnetic energy, animate objects, inanimate objects, just by virtue of the fact that there are atoms and, electrons, revolving around the neutrons and so forth. So that creates an electromagnetic field, of course, and any object, animate or inanimate, has that lower level electromagnetic energy. The Ba and the Ba'et is the divine living energy coming directly from Ra and Ra'et, the great spirit, the creator and creatress, who, by the way, are grandchildren of the Supreme Being, Amen and Ameneto, Nyame Wa Nyame. Because they have that divine living energy, and a portion of that is within us that animates us, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. That's our energetic link to the creator and creatress. And because that energy is linked to all naturally created entities, not the whites and their offspring, but naturally created entities, naturally created plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, human life. We have that energetic link to the forces of nature, the energetic link to the Abosom, the Nananom Nsamanfo, the ancestresses and ancestors, and the energetic link to all of the naturally created entities in creation. All of these capacities, so we talked about the soul, the divine consciousness, the divinity that dwells in the head region, that you originally began to experience as a pull in your head region towards thoughts, intentions, and actions that are harmonious with divine order, and it repels you from engaging in thoughts, intentions, and actions, behavior that would put you in harmony, out of harmony with divine order. So when you say, something told me I needed to do this, but I went and did something else, went in the other direction, and it caused me a number of problems, very often that's your Okraa. Sometimes it's the Nsamanfo, sometimes it's the Abosom, but very often it's your Okraa pulling you in one direction. And if you align yourself with that, then you are successful, you live in harmony. If you go outside of that, then you cause problems for yourself. And spirituality is about the alignment and realignment of your sumsum, your spirit, with that Okraa, that Krawa, with every thought, intention, and action, every moment of every day. So, you have a Okraa, you have a soul, a divine consciousness, a divinity that was assigned to you pre-incarnation, assigned to take up a residence in the spiritual head. You came into the world with that. You have that divine living energy placed in you by Ra and Ra'et, pre-incarnation. That's inherited. You have Nsamanfo who were assigned to you, great-grandmothers, great-grandfathers, and so forth, who lived in the past. They're part of your ancestral blood circle. They guide you. Pre-incarnation, they were assigned to you. You came through their blood circle, so you're connected with them. And then there are Abosom that are assigned to you by the Supreme Being. They give you the kind of energy you need to execute your function. If you're an immune system cell within the great divine body, the Supreme Being, Nyame will assign Abosom who have the kind of fiery energy that you will be able to use to execute that fiery function. Whatever your function is, you're assigned Abosom that will assist you to execute that function because they have that kind of energy. This is all pre-incarnation. This is encoded within you when you come into the world. So we say all of these capacities are spirit-genetically inherited. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit did not lose our connection to the Nsamanfo, the Abosom, our Okraa, Okrawa, our Abra, our connection to Nkompon, Nkonton, to Nyamewa, Nyame, because we were captured as prisoners of war and sold into enslavement in the Western Hemisphere. The Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo are connected to us and will forever remain connected to our Okraa, Nemoja, our souls and blood, transcarnation. So before you engage in any formal ritual practice, these non-ritual means or non-ritual media of communication are possible because of your spirit genetically inherited capacity. Because you have a Krawa, because you have a Bra, because you have a soul of divine consciousness, the deity dwelling in the head region, because you have a divine force of living energy animating your body and connecting you to the divine living energy of all of the created entities, naturally created entities, because you have Abosom that are connected to you, assigned to you before birth, because you have Nsamanfos, ancestresses and ancestors who are assigned to guide you throughout your life before birth, because you have all of these very genetically inherited capacities. This is why the non-ritual means of communication can occur. This is why clairsentience can occur, clairvoyance can occur, clairaudience can occur, clairgustance, clairailience, clairtimiance, clairequilibrance can occur. This is why the Nsamanfo have been sending animal totems at certain times in your life to communicate with you, because you already have these capacities. This is why various forms of communication, rudimentary divination, you try to attune to say, is this going to happen? Should I go in this direction or should I not? Should I make this decision? And you have a strong feeling not to make that decision. You're engaged in a rudimentary form of adivisa or oracular inquiry. Then you find out later when you made that right decision and you look back and see what actually took place. If you had stayed in that same position, you would have suffered a great deal, and you realize that you received some assistance. You were engaged in communication with your Okra and didn't realize it. You were engaged in communication with the Abosom, didn't realize it. You were engaged in communication with the Nsamanfo, didn't realize it. You were engaged in conjuration. You were engaged in actual experience with the forces in nature and your ancestresses and ancestors. That is the root. Once you contextualize that experience, you don't shy away from it, but you embrace it, and those experiences begin to expand. You have consciously plugged into the order of creation. That begins to shift the way you perceive the world, and the only reason you shift is because the way we've been conditioned to perceive the world is foolish. So once you begin to interface consciously with the Nananom Nsamanfo and the Abosom, then your perception of the way things are, the way things should be, the kind of decisions you should make, it shifts back to normal, and you realign. And then you start having a different perspective. You have a real perspective of what order is, how we should align with that order. Then you begin to re-embrace and function in the world as an Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit person. Then you become, quote-unquote, African-centered, because you're centered on Inyame wa Inyame, the Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo, the Supreme Being, the Deities, and the ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated. That is what makes you Afrocentric or African-centered. And then you start moving forward. You are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit. Now, that's before you learn anything formal, before you study anything, before you begin to read books, before you go to individuals and they're doing rituals or listening to lecturers or people talking about language and talking about scholarship or whatever. Before any of that happens, until you engage consciously with that which you have been encoded with, then you don't really understand culture. But when you contextualize what you've been experiencing, now you begin to understand what ancestral religion really is. Then when you begin to learn language, then when you begin to study trustery and study these various things, that simply enhances your capacity to interact and interface with the Abosom based on what you've already been encoded to do and what your responsibilities are and your capacities are. All right, so before we get to the second section, I want to check the, checking through the chat room right quick. Okay, we're going to go through the rest of this particular section, and then we're going to take a couple of calls. So that was that section showing that very genetic inheritance. Now, then we go into some information about how we were born and raised in America. We learned about our culture in that fashion, dealing with the Nsamanfo at some point, beginning to learn different things, the Nananom Nsamanfo and Abosom. Once we began to connect with them, contextualize those experiences that we've had since childhood, non-ritual media of communication, then we began to embrace culture and begin to look into culture. That's an ancestral mandate. Just the fact that you're trying to learn something, your cry moves you to say, listen, I know there's something wrong with Christianity, Islam, all of this nonsense, white culture. Your cry is moving you to execute your function in creation. Your Nsamanfo are moving you to learn what you need to learn about your trustery and so forth, and you begin to seek it out based on that foundation you already have. And that foundation you already have, you came into the world with. Once you begin to acknowledge that, then you become rooted in the culture. You become rooted in that foundation. And then when you begin to study other things with regard to language, with regard to culture, with regard to trucery, with regard to ritual and so forth, you will begin on a solid foundation. If you have neglected that set foundation you have, or believe that you don't have a foundation, you allow people to tell you, whether they're from the continent or from here, that until you become initiated, you won't understand anything about the culture. Or until you go through some process with a certain individuals, you won't understand the culture. Until you learn language, you won't understand the culture. If you've been brainwashed to believe that nonsense, then you'll become just like those individuals, because they're constantly misinforming people about the culture, about the cosmology, about the language, about ritual practices. And this is why when you look at the state of ancestral religion as it's practiced in North America, the Western Hemisphere in general, as well as on the continent, it's in a sorry state. People are not developing, they're not, engaged in harmonious behavior, that they're not affecting the communities that they're in, whether it's on the continent as well as in the Western Hemisphere in a positive fashion. They're actually promoting white values very often, or they're so weak that they're allowing the whites in their offspring or agents of the whites in their offspring to penetrate the practice of the culture, incorporate all kinds of perverse ideas, philosophies, and so forth. So when people get really grounded in who they are based on who they came into the world with, Nsamanfo and Abosom, they came into the world with, that is the foundation you begin from, and then you begin to reincorporate the external expressions of the culture. So we talk about that. We talk about how we started with that foundation first. Then, of course, we begin to study more. Nsamanfo Abosom directed us to linguistic, cultural, and cosmological evidence proving the continuum of culture from ancient Khanid, Nubian, Kemet, and so forth to contemporary Akan culture, as well as other Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit cultures in West Afuraka, Afuraikai, and also its retention and manifestation in the blood circles of those who were captured and sold during the enslavement era in the Western Hemisphere. So under the guidance of our Akwamufo Nsamanfo, our Akwamu ancestresses and ancestors, and the Abosom, that the components of our name was given, all the components, ODWIRA, Kwesi, Rad, Nahambata, Akan. And this is why when people ask about names and ancestry and so forth, we always talk about establishing your own nkom, dealing with your own blood relatives, ancestresses and ancestors, as well as the Abosom that govern you, to learn about what your actual name is, as opposed to spending some money and having somebody tell you, hey, this is what your name is supposed to be. I did the roots reading, and this is what it is. You can't depend on someone else that has no connection to you to give you what your ancestresses and ancestors have placed in you and that you were born into the world with. It is you have that capacity, and you also have that responsibility as an adult to communicate with your people. Just like you communicate with your parents and with your children and with your relatives, that's your responsibility. It is our responsibility spiritually to communicate with our Nsamanfo and begin that process. And as we begin that process, then they will show these things to us, and they will also begin to point out the various non-ritual media of communication that they've been using to communicate with us ever since we were children. And they will resurrect those memories and connect the dots for you so you can be grounded and fully focused on what's going on. So the next piece we talk about the method of engaging in direct communication with the Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo as a foundation for subsequent investigation, uncovering, recording, and institutionalizing accurate and relevant cultural, historic, and ritual knowledge informs our process of Ancestral nation-building restoration and thus the reestablishment of Akwamumai and Marukai Tivimu, the Akwamu nation in North America. This method also informs all of the research we publish, which can be found on our website. So we're talking about that approach to dealing with the cultural, what we have inherited spiritually as our foundation, learning directly from our Okraa, from the Abosom and Nsamanfo. Once we get that information, then ask them to direct us to physical evidence of what we've been given. Then we go and investigate that physical evidence, sort it out, make our comparisons, make sure everything is lined up and it's demonstrable, and then we publish that information. So it starts off with inquiry with regards to the Okraa, the Abosom and Nsamanfo, dealing with Inyame wa Inyame through the agency of the Abosom and Nsamanfo, receive that information, then incorporate that, get direction, learn where we can find that information tangibly, investigate it, produce it, publish it, and then release it to other individuals so they can study it, so they can investigate it, so that they can verify it, and they can also engage in ritual practice themselves. So that's the process that we use, and that's the capacity that all of us have. So we go into some more information talking about the Nsamanfo and blood circles and so forth. The next part is we say it is part of the function of the Nananom Nsamanfo to ritually connect and reconnect us to the Abosom within and around us. Those within inherited via our circulage, our blood circles, and around us, those in the environment. We stand upon and experience the magnetism of Asase Afur, the Earth Mother. We feel the energy of the Abosom within the ODWIRA, the sun, and Osurane, the moon, and the Ochin Soroma, the planet. We are nourished from the waters of the Abosom in the Opo, the ocean, and invigorated by the Abosom who operate through the Mframa, the wind. The Abosom have never left us and are indeed all around us and have nkombre, shrines within our bodies and spirit. And our various organs and organ systems are physical shrines for the Abosom, and we've talked about that in previous broadcasts. The Abosom communicate with us, and we transmit their energy via moja, blood, to our offspring in every successive generation, wherever we find ourselves in the world. It was the Abosom and Nsamanfo, in concert with the Nananom Nsamanfo, who empowered and guided the akom, the warriors and warrioresses, to independence and gave us the strength to endure and overcome all obstacles through the Musuo Kesi era, the enslavement era. They are poised to do the same today, and this is true of all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, and only Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit. So it is the Nsamanfo, when we waged war and freed ourselves from enslavement, established independent communities all over the southern and southeastern United States and western in some cases. During the enslavement period, some of our people freed ourselves, armed ourselves, and defended those free settlements intergenerationally. We've talked about that on numerous occasions in the broadcast. Powered by the direction coming from the Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo, who are connected to us by blood, as well as the Abosom in the environment that are all around us. And they're poised to do the same thing today for all of our people. So, and we just want to make sure. So that's the information with regard to that particular publication that we needed to touch on. The key is the non-ritual media communication is first. Communication through the 7 spiritual senses, through dreams, seeding intuitions within us, animal totems, and so forth. Various forms of communication that we have experienced. That also includes what some will call, well, before we even get into that particular article, let us take a call right quick, and then we're going to get into the second part. We're going to get into some more detailed information.
His own name first.
Okay.
Okay.
The Chiawo number 5096.
Word at the speed of Nikkei. This is something that even the Wazungu has taken into his tradition. We get it as a term synonym.
Now, could you say it again?
Study of the word.
It's a place where you go to study the quote-unquote word of God.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The root of seminary is synonym.
Number 5096. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. How are you?
Okay?
I'm good. How you doing?
Okay. right? The root is...
okay, what was the question? Did you ask me a question? Hi, my name is Lorraine.
Okay, you had a question or a comment? I saw that the hand was raised in the console.
There was a question I had. Let's see, was it, that was several, and I can't remember. Let me get into thoughts here. The spiritual, physical, the spiritual is feminine and masculine all the time. Is what I wanted to ask. One question. It's always
I'm trying to hear you, but there's something in the background. I couldn't hear. I can hear something in the background. Can you pose the question again?
I was saying, is it the forces? Is it always masculine and feminine all the time? You know, when it's the forces.
Right. So the forces in nature, just like us, male and female, you know, human beings, and same with animals. That foundational relationship, the balance of male and female, comes from the great mother and the great father, which is Amenet and Amen, or Nyamewa and Nyame, the great mother and the great father. So there are deities, there are feminine divinities, forces in nature, and they're masculine. They're male and female forces. They are independent entities who think, function, have their own function in creation, and we are children of those divinities. So yes, they are male and female, Abosom, Orisha, Vodou, and so forth.
Okay, when you just finished speaking, did you mention something about like the seed of the force, like the seed, that we all are from a certain seed, and it was a name that you called it. I didn't get that name. Something
I
like
did
that.
say they well, I would say they like the Nsamanfo seed intuitions into our consciousness and so forth, but ultimately, Nyamewa, Nyame, Amenet, Amen, Mawu, and Lisa, and Vodun, different names in different cultures, but it's the same. The great mother and great father, that is the source from which all of us, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people come, as well as plant life, animal life, mineral life, planets, sun, moon, stars, and so forth, all operate within the great divine body of the Supreme Being, which is Amenet and Amen, or Nyamewa and Nyame.
And it's all considered being the seed of the force. Like that's the birth of the seed. You know what I mean? Like the coming forth of all of us, we have that within us, the seed from our...
definitely. So, yeah.
Abosom, you know, it's like we all are born with it, is what you were saying.
Exactly. Just by virtue of the fact that, and we're going to get into that in this next section, but just by virtue of the fact that you have the capacity to have these various experiences, and we talked about the non-ritual media or means of communication, as opposed to, you know, there are formal rituals, pouring libation and shrines and various things, but there are non-ritual means of communication or media forms of communication, like clairvoyance, seeing beyond the physical, where you can see an ancestral spirit walking around, or you can hear an ancestral spirit, or you can feel the energy in the room and so forth. They are communicating with us. The reason they can do that is because we have that connection. That's inborn. When we come into the womb, we already have it from the spirit realm. So all we have to do, first of all, is recognize that reality, contextualize it properly. That becomes the foundation from which we move forward and begin to incorporate the ritual means of communication that enhances our ritual practice. But the key is, when we have these experiences, we need to recognize it is because of our spiritual anatomy. It's because we have Okra, we have a soul, a divine consciousness. It's because we have a Ba, we have divine living energy that animates all the cells in our body. We have forces in nature that are assigned to us, and this is why we're inclined towards certain kinds of behaviors and certain kinds of activities, and we're disinclined from other kinds of behaviors and certain activities because we have a certain function to execute in the world. We actually have a purpose, a life focus, called Okra and Nkrabi and akom, and every group has a name for the life focus, but it's wired within us. It's encoded within us. So once we know we have that coming through, We can't be, pulled in different directions by people saying, hey, you need to do this, hey, you need to do that. You can't learn anything unless you come up under me and do this because you don't know anything. You have to start studying and getting fed information to become spiritual. You come into the world spiritually rooted, and that needs to be, expanded, opened up. And then additional information is just supplemental.
Okay, let me tell you what I did this evening. I noticed how, this was exciting. This was so exciting. I was listening to you, and then I'm listening to a show called Kim Show. And what was very enlightening, he would ask a question, and then you would answer the same question that he was asking. And then some things he would say, then you would say it. And I was just over here having a ball.
Oh, okay.
It was like you guys were in sync. Yeah, that's what was happening. It was like you guys were in sync, and I was just thanking the ancestors. They were just it was like it was. It wasn't. It was the answer. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Because you guys was like, I don't know what is that. Because that's the energy. Both of you guys were like talking about the same thing, and I swear neither one of you don't know what. You know what I'm saying? But I'm like sitting here in the middle, just having a ball. Like it's like the energies from the ancestors, or from wherever that energy's from. Or is it? Maybe it's me. Maybe I did it. I don't know. You tell me.
Well, if you felt inclined towards to tune in to both things at the same time because you had a yearning to learn a specific kind of information, the things you needed to know right now, then they will move you in a position to gather information from those two places because they knew this was going to be happening at the same time, so they put you in the position to receive it. You could have been listening to two other radio stations somewhere else on another night, but if they knew you had specific questions, then they motivated you to tune in. Okay, this is the night that you need to tune in because those questions will be answered. So that's the way they synchronize events and put their signature on events so that you can see. And again, it goes back to contextualizing the things that they have been doing with us ever since childhood and all the way through adulthood, of course, beginning to see how they've been operating all along, and that begins to recalibrate your perception towards what's, how things unfold, how events unfold in your life.
Okay.
All
right. I'm ready for the second half. Thank you.
Okay, and we appreciate the call, may I say. Okay, we have one more call, and then we're going to get into the second piece. Okay, Michiawo, number 9854. You had a question or a comment on the phone line?
Yes, Brother Quaker, real quick. With us and the teachings that we're learning from you, and do we have people that are certified as to perform marriages and to be able to give a certificate, to be able to give something, because we have a lot of our children still in the public school system, and when certain things come up, and we're still the certain documents are required to show white folks whatever they ask you for, because that's all they understand is documents. So do we have someone that like I said, for marriage ceremonies, things that we need to present in court, things that we need to present, at these public schools. I'm trying to think of something else too that we do we have something, anybody available for that?
I understand what you're saying. What we do, and this is what people do just in general when they get involved in ancestral culture and so forth, there is a process by which you go through those various different things. So, for example, when it deals with marriage, all the various states have their requirements for what is considered a religious institution and who can be who is considered a religious leader and so forth. and they can perform those things. On one hand, you get the license from the state, and that's just basically signing documents, and that's for anybody, whether they're Christian, Muslim, whatever it is, involved in faith, religion, or whatever. You get the license from the state, signing those documents, but the ceremony is, performed by, the head of the institution, the religious institution, or the pseudo-religious institution. So what people who are involved in traditional culture do is they find out the laws of the state, and typically just around the country, any spiritual practice that you declare, that's considered a religious practice. They don't tell you, well, this can be a religious practice, but this cannot. If some people decide they want to, like you got some fools out here worshiping Beyonce, called Bayism. They have a Babel or a Bible, and all this other nonsense. As far as the state is concerned, that's a legitimate religion. They can appoint their own leaders and so forth, and they can perform marriage ceremonies, and as long as they register that, they can do that. So whatever, because they can't put a sanction on who's practicing religion and who's not. They're not supposed to be a separation of church and state. So whatever you identify as, you can automatically declare that, and that is your religious practice, and therefore you are the religious leader, and you can legitimately perform marriages, as well as funerals and everything else. As far as the marriage license, that's just going down to the State House and signing those documents so that, as well as name change documents and stuff like that for tax purposes and property taxes and all that other stuff. But as far as the acknowledgement of the services, you can do that.
I noticed too that it doesn't have anything for it. It just it doesn't have anything for that.
Right. No, it won't list that, but it's just like some people have white supremacist organizations, and they'll call that their religion, and they can register that as their religion, like white supremacy, white nationalism. They're the religious leader of the white nationalists of Ohio or something. They are the spiritual head, and that is considered a religion, and they can perform marriage ceremonies and everything else. So it's the same way. So anybody practicing ancestral religion, all those different things, whether it has to do with, marriage ceremonies, other ritual ceremonies, even if it has to do with, vaccinations and things like that. You have
right, that's what I'm getting at. Right. Right.
There's rules set in place where you find out what the, principles are, and then you file those documents or file those petitions or whatever, because there's a number of different groups doing that. The ones who practice pseudo-religions, the ones who are pseudo-New Age spiritualists, who manufacture fake little temples and everything else, they're engaged in the same process as well. They find out what the laws are, fill out that paperwork, and that's that. So anybody who's involved in like the Yoruba tradition or Akom tradition or some of these, Kemetic temples and so forth, they all go through that process. And the same thing when they're establishing schools, whether it's, pre-K, elementary schools or high schools or whatever. They can have private schools, and they can establish them as private schools, or some people want to do homeschooling. You go through the process and find out what the requirements are, what the criteria is to establish a homeschool. And there are people doing that all over the country, whether it's with the pseudo-religions, with the pseudo-spiritualities, as well as people who are engaged in traditional culture, real ancestral religion. You find out what that criteria is, and you just, submit the proper paperwork, and that's it.
Beautiful. I love it. Beautiful. Okay. All right.
Okay.
What do y'all say?
Okay. What
do y'all say?
Okay. We have one more call, and then we're going to get to the second portion. Get me Chiowo on the phone line.
Yes. You brought up something about the last call about the white supremacists signing under some type of church so they could practice their so-called supremacy. My question, are you familiar with Frances Cress Welsing's work? Frances Cress Welsing?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, my take to ask you is, throughout her work that she wrote and did for, like, let's say 4 decades, what is it that you find interesting about her particular work? Franz Christopher. That's my first question.
Well, on one hand, since she's a psychiatrist and she was delving into these issues, and then she connected with the brother Neely Fuller, and then she started realizing that, that she'll always make that statement: if you don't understand white supremacy, then anything you think you understand, you really won't understand. If you don't understand that system, then that's, you don't know what you're looking at. You don't know how to analyze specific things. So that's one key, and it's similar to when we talk about divine law and divine hate. When we talk about divine order, and the expansive pole of order is law or love, and the contractive pole is hate. If you don't understand hate, you don't understand what to reject, who to reject, and how to do so, then you're always going to be off base. You're cutting yourself off from half of all of the created order when you reject divine hate, which is what the whites and their offspring want us to reject. So it's similar in that regard. And then also for people who had never been introduced to any of that kind of information, even when she's talking about ball games and different things, she's showing people just on a fundamental level, just based on psychology 101, that every action, everything that people engaged in is just not a happenstance. It's just not like one day they just decided, hey, I'm going to do this, or hey, I'm going to draw a picture like this, or hey, I'm going to create a game like this, or hey, I'm going to dress like this or interact with this. There's always a psychological foundation. There's always an undercurrent. There's always a motivation for why people operate and express themselves the way that they do. So if people hadn't been introduced to that kind of information, they had never been introduced to any kind of information regarding psychology, they began to realize everything that people say and do is motivated by things that are within them. Nothing is just, a happenstance. So the way they operate with regard to us is rooted in who they actually are and have always been. So those things are key.
Yeah, the reason I bring it up because she does talk about Neely Fuller, and I have gone through that so-called brother's work, and once I find there's a problem that and I think he's a product of biracial stock, bigs and gives these people the actual esteem of power, like our people cannot overcome their so-called reign. That's one of the issues I have with Neely Fuller, because they always say they're all most powerful, which is nonsense. How these people could be all most powerful? It's like this. People got to be careful what they read, because a lot of these people that's in doctors and physicians, their motives and what they say linguistically in the written can mess with people's mentality if they're not careful. Because what you read, what you expect, So at times it's not bringing proper clarity. People are going to accept the written word that these people are all so-called powerful, which they're not. That's the only reason why I kind of asked that question, because she emphasized Neely Fuller to a degree, and I go through Neely Fuller's work, and I find that in his work, and I said I could not really accept that, because psychology, deeply, you cannot say these people are all powerful, but they play these type of games to keep our people under these type of paradigms with the religion stuff, to let them know that they have no power, but which really we do have power. Is we have to go back to the ancestral thing to really get back that sense of power, to really overthrow their reign of power. You know what I'm saying?
I understand. And that's the key, that comment you made. That's when we talk about non-ritual media of communication, what's missing in that kind of analysis when it's coming from black psychologists, a number of them, psychiatrists and therapists and social workers and so forth, people involved in behavioral health, mental health services, who are not involved in ancestral culture and religion, they don't understand the foundational order of creation, the expansive and contractive poles of order. So they've been taught by psychology that hate is wrong, for example. They don't recognize hate is actually comprised of two, a male and female divinity, forces in nature. And so it's a divine function. So not being involved in culture, not understanding culture, the analysis becomes skewed. The other piece is, as we talked about in the beginning, when you start with the foundation of what we have inherited transcarnationally, spirigenetically, the Okra, the soul, the divine consciousness, the Ba, the divine living energy, and the Abosom who are connected to us, the Nsamanfo who are connected to us. When you have that foundation that you came into the world with and you begin to properly contextualize that, then you can make proper decisions and proper analysis. If you're missing that in the various motivations that you have, you won't know the origin or the provenance of those motivations, and you may assign false value to those motivations. For example, a psychologist, if someone is engaged in immature behavior or self-destructive behavior because they have a traumatic brain injury or something like that, they go to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. There are neurological problems. They may prescribe that they get certain medication. There's a physical issue, and it causes negative behavior, self-destructive behavior, maladaptive behavior. It's the same thing like if you break your arm, break your leg, you're not going to walk the same way as causing a problem. And some people have brain injuries that cause a problem. But then you have other people who are, just engaged in immaturity. Immature behavior. Ever since they were children, they would scream and yell and throw things and do whatever when they got mad, and nobody ever checked them on that, so they've been operating that ever since, and they've been getting away with it, and now it's negatively affecting their lives, and they become depressed and explosive and angry and affecting other people negatively and get themselves locked up in all kinds of things. People say, well, they have psychological problems, so they go to a therapist and so forth, and they're just dealing with, bottom line, immature people. And a large percentage of the people who are not, really have a real injury, a neurological issue, large percentage of these people who are coming in to see therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists and so forth, many of them are just engaged in immature behavior, and they need someone to talk to. And once they get into that arena and that therapeutic setting, even the setting itself begins to affect the way they behave, because they know, okay, I'm coming into this building. I know I can't act a fool too much here. They're already being, changed or influenced just by virtue of the fact that they're in a different setting. And then when they sit with the psychologist or the therapist, they see them as an authority, and they know they're supposed to act in a certain way. And even though they may express themselves in a certain manner, they still pull back on certain things. So there are a lot of dynamics going on there. It's not the brilliance of the therapist very often. Very often it's just sitting down long enough to say, at some point, stop acting the fool. You know what you're doing wrong. You know what you should be doing. At some point, you're going to have to start doing that, or you're going to keep being involved in self-destructive behavior. You're going to keep, suffering. And after a while, they just decide to start acting right. And it's not the brilliance of the therapist. It's really them just taking their time to get to that point, if they want to get to that point, and maybe the therapist assists them to that point. But then you have people who have real psychological problems that are not based on a neurological issue, not simply based on, deep-seated immaturity and ignorance, but they have real issues. They manifest what they would call, schizophrenia, manifest what they would call bipolar 1 disorder, or bipolar 2, or manifest what they would call, deep anxiety disorders or major depressive disorders or whatever. They're hearing voices and so forth and having, quote unquote, what they would say, they're having tactile hallucinations and all this nonsense. And the psychiatrists and the psychologists and therapists, they have no answer for that because they've been misinformed and miseducated. So they have degrees, they're doctors, PhDs, medical doctors and so forth, and they have no answer. So what they do is they put the people on medication, creates more problems for the people because they don't understand what's going on. But their training has taught them, foolish ideas and philosophy. So if they say I'm hearing voices and I'm seeing people walking around, the psychiatrists, psychologists will try to convince them, or the therapists, that they're not seeing people walking around. They're not hearing any voices, and clearly there are no people here. The domain of communicating with individuals who are going through these kinds of behavioral disturbances has always been the domain of the priests and priestesses, the akom, the Abosom, and so forth. When somebody is seeing an ancestral spirit, they're seeing an ancestral spirit. And if you're a real healer or healeress, you can see that ancestral spirit and you can show the person, you can either direct that spirit away from them or you can show the person how they can repel that entity, and that's the end of the therapeutic session. Within 15 minutes, you engage in a ritual and repel that entity and it's over. These fools don't understand that because they are enamored with the pseudo-education, the false education they've been given by the whites and their offspring, and they put the people on medication and then pat themselves on the back for having medicated or drugged these people for years. And these people are coming on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis or every other week for years for quote-unquote therapy and medication management. And they're not solving any problem, a problem that could have been solved in 15 minutes by engaging in an ancestral ritual to actually repel these entities. So because they're not involved in real culture, their analysis becomes severely skewed. But they don't realize that, so they're patting themselves on the back. And you have people all across the country. We've worked in behavioral health in that field for a number of years, so we've engaged therapists and psychologists and, psychiatrists and worked with clients in therapeutic settings and so forth. And there's a clear difference between the people who are being affected by Nsamanfo, ancestral spirits, and discarnate, disembodied spirits, and those people who are just acting a fool and getting away with it until they're checked on it. And then people who have a real neurological issue, a medical issue that can be dealt with. When they have those issues, we recommend people that are getting that medication from, pharmaceutical companies and so forth. You go to a naturopathic physician who deals with mental health issues and neurological issues. And they can get the person back on track in a holistic fashion, medically, just like the pharmaceuticals put people on a negative track. But beyond that, for the people who have a real issue, schizophrenia or whatever, based on them interacting with negative discarnate spirits, people who are involved in real culture can deal with that. Psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists, they can't deal with that, so they paper it over by drugging the people and giving them pseudo-little therapy that wastes their time for years. So it always goes back again to when we embrace our culture, then we can start making better decisions and have a proper analysis of these things.
All right. Well, thank you for answering the question. Till next time, Midase.
Okay, and Yeni Aseda, and we appreciate the call. Okay, so we're going to take one more call, and then we're going to get into the second part of the information, and we'll talk about some of these experiences that our people have and how they can be properly contextualized. Okay, number 1250 on the phone line. You had a question or comment? Hold on one second. Let me see if we got that. Okay, number 1250 on the phone line. You had a question or a comment?
Annie Majuo, this is Sister Kentake speaking. I have I have a comment. I just came on the line. I'm on my phone, actually. I don't have internet access. But when you speak about experience, you're speaking about direct communication with your Okra and your Nananom Nsamanfo. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. In that case, if someone is basically reluctant to communicate with their Nananom Nsamanfo, do they then have any, when they speak on cosmology or culture, do they have a grounding to speak on that, or is it an obnoxious question to ask? Because I'm saying, if someone doesn't have that communication going, do they have the authority to speak on cosmology and culture and ancestral religion, even if they're African? Or to say that they're an expert on it, for example. I'm
right.
saying, like yourself, yeah, exactly. Like someone who does not do, like yourself, participate in ritual for that reason, correct? You know what I mean? So I'm just asking, is that something that, can be put to question?
Well,
right?
Well, when someone is neglecting the direction that's coming from their Okra, right? And they're neglecting the Abosom, neglecting the Nsamanfo, and then everything they're doing is just simply based on, number one, what they have read from someone, or their interactions with other individuals, whether other individuals were engaged in ritual or not. But if someone has disaligned from their own Okra, then that disalignment is going to manifest in what they teach and what they express and how they operate and so forth. So they've taken themselves out of the realm of being able to properly convey information regarding culture. So we started off, you may have mentioned at the beginning, we started off talking about the non-ritual media of communication, and then we talked about the ritual media of communication. So the non-ritual media of communication, ever since we are children and growing into adults, the Nsamanfo will communicate with us through our 7 spiritual senses, like clairvoyance, seeing beyond the physical, or clairaudience, hearing beyond the physical, or clairsentience, feeling spirits in the room and so forth. Various ways they communicate. They communicate through dreams and so forth. They communicate through animal totems, certain animals showing up at specific times. So they've been communicating with us all of our lives, and we have to contextualize that. And then when we begin to engage in ritual, that just enhances or expands that communication. So we begin to engage in libation, ritual song, ritual prayer, and everything else. That enhances what we already have. But if you don't understand that foundation that you already have and totally neglect that, and then let someone come and tell you, hey, in order to get involved in African culture, you have to study the language so you can know how the people, thought. And we gave an example in the beginning that if that were the case, then all the people on the continent right now who speak their ancestral language should be masters of cosmology and culture and ritual and philosophy. And clearly they're not, because millions of them are Christians and they believe a white man in God. So learning the language in and of itself, in and out, has done absolutely nothing for those people. And participating in certain rituals and so forth has done absolutely nothing for those millions of people who are Christians and Muslims on the continent who are scared of their own ancestral culture. So the key is, the first move to make to recognize what you have inherited spiritually pre-incarnation directly from your Abosom, from the Nananom Nsamanfo, from your Okra, and recognize that communication they have been putting forward and giving you ever since you were a child, and begin to contextualize that and recognize what it is, and then that's your foundation. And then you move forward. Some people have... Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I have a question. In terms of, in Yoruba cosmology, your Ori it's kind of like a vague thing. However, from the perspective that you're overstanding it, it's something that they're telling you that in order to, from the way I have been trained in Vodun, Yoruba Orisha, is that when you are dealing with your Ori, you need to go to a priest, and you do a sacrifice, whatever, to your Ori, and the priest needs to, invoke your Ori for you, which I always thought was quite insane, right? The latest thing I heard too was that the priest, or Ifa priest, needs to talk to your ancestors on your behalf. So there's a lot of this. I need to do everything for you, which I would say in a lot of ways, even in Yoruba, it's kind of like I don't really want to use the word witchcraft, but it's kind of like stealing energy, because if the priest is invoking your Ori on your behalf, then he's using that energy for whatever he wants to do with it. You're right? This is what my own experience has told me. What I'm saying, however, now from what I'm learning and developing, as I'm developing, is that this is something, your Okra is something that you access yourself. You don't need someone to access that for you, which would be obviously ridiculous, right? What I'm asking, though, in terms of this, your work that I'm studying currently, if I'm a Monday born, for example. So if I'm a Monday born, does that mean that Adwa is governing my Okra, or she's just my Krabin? Like, I'm trying to get the actual understanding of Krabin Bosom. Does that energy govern over your Okra, or I'm just trying to get completely to understand what you mean when, and I haven't read everything. I haven't done all, I haven't read completely a lot of the I haven't reviewed as much as I should because there's only so much time in a day, right? So, but is the Kradin Bosom, are they governing our Okra? If you could just explain for one moment about that, because I need to get that clear in my mind at the moment.
Yes. So, and for your the previous comment, like when you talked about people stealing energy and attempting to do that, normally in a normal situation, if somebody says, well, I need to talk to your ancestors for you and all that, normally when we're growing up and so forth, when your children, your parents have, of course, an ancestral shrine, and as your children, your parents, communicate with the Nsamanfo on behalf of the family, and then as you're a child, you see the Nsamanfo as well, and you have experiences with them, and when you grow up, you go through the rite of passage, then you begin to communicate and so forth. So, and you establish your own shrine once you become independent in your own home and so forth, and you do the same thing with your children. So it is typically a family thing like that starting off. But, of course, the way things are done here, people are manufacturing all different kinds of things, and yes, people will try to control what's going on, tell you can't communicate with anything. They try to make you fear communicating with your own people, because you may pull up some other spirits and so forth. You have to pay them some money so they can communicate with your own people, which is inaccurate. When they tell you, well, I'll communicate with your Ori for you because you can't, of course, that's not accurate. Now, if somebody if your Ori directs you to connect with a relative who is a priest or priestess, or connect with somebody who's actually connected to you in some fashion, you get divination. Real divination is divining the Ori, but that's at the permission of the person's Ori. The Ori is directing the person. Okay, you're not getting what I'm trying to tell you internally, so the priest or the priestess is simply showing you externally what the Ori has been trying to show you internally, but that's only with the permission of the Ori. It's not like, hey, you have to come to me because you can't hear your Ori. It doesn't work that way. And what happens is what you said. When people are not in alignment with their own Ori and the Orisha and the Egungun, and they engage in Ifa divination or Erin Dilugun or whatever, what it does it quickly degenerates into lower-level witchcraft, because if there are no Orisha present supporting what they're doing, there are no Egungun present, then all those rituals you find in the Esefa and everything, like, Orumila said you need to give this many cowries or this many rats or this many whatever, when there are no Orisha present, the only spirits that will take those offerings are discarnate, criminal, drunk spirits or whatever, and they will take anything you give them. It doesn't matter what, what combination you give. It's no longer, connected to Ifa at that point. Like in the Abosom, Orisha governs certain aspects of creation. They have a certain energy complex that they resonate with, and then there are certain animal life, plant life, mineral life, and so forth that resonate at that same frequency. So when you offer those things, you're aligning your spirit with theirs because they're on the same frequency and all of that. But once they're gone from the scene, you've repelled their, direction, and you're not paying attention, and it doesn't matter about, well, you need this many calories and this many. It don't matter any of that. Just like an alcoholic, they don't care what label is on the bottle. They're going to drink whatever you give them. So whatever you're sacrificing or whatever animal you're sacrificing, that becomes this lower-level witchcraft. Whatever you kill, they're going to take the energy that's released for a few minutes from that animal. They're going to feed off that, and they may do something that you ask them to do because they want another animal killed for them, like a crackhead. So that's what's happening with many of these individuals. So, yes, you are correct. So the key with regard to the bosom, and it's two things. Number one, if you are a Khan, and I'm just saying in general for people who are listening with regard to Okra and Bosom, a system with regard to the Abosom that govern the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies, which govern the Akom 7-day week, because Akom forged a specific kind of relationship or agreement with these Abosom so that they will send us through into the world on the day that they govern. That's a relationship that we forged with them. The Yoruba people and the Fula people and the Maasai people, they worship the same divinities, but they forged a different agreement, so theirs looks different. So they don't deal with the 7-day week, but they still find out. They find out in a different way which Abosom or Orisha govern them based on the agreement that they forge. But the agreement that the Akom people forge is with regard to the Okra and Okraa is that 7-day week, the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies which govern the 7-day week. So if the person is Akom, yes, when you're born on, for example, Joada, Monday, that means that, and you're female, Nana Ajua, who is offset, she's the great Abosom, that female Abosom, feminine force animating the moon. She's the great mother, the birth canal of creation, and so forth. The great mother is Nyamewa or Amenet, and one of her great-grandchildren is offset. So you have your body, but then your womb and birth canal is a portion of your great body. You are like Amenet, but then your womb and birth canal is like Offset or Ajua. You understand? So Ajua is one of the great mother Abosom. She's Minona in Odun, and she's Oduduwa, the female Oduduwa, wife of Orishanla or wife of Obatala in the Yoruba tradition. So when they talk about Obatala and Oduduwa, it's husband and wife, and Oduduwa is black and she's nursing the baby on her lap and all that, that's Osar and Offset or Awus Ajua and Akan. So she's one of the great mothers. So because you were born on her day, when your spirit, your Sun went to, before you, if someone makes that transition, the spirit leaves the body, they're an ancestral spirit, ancestor, and they're living in Asamando, the ancestral realm. They're one of the Nsamanfo. After a couple of hundred years or something, or less than that, it's time for them to return to the world. But before they get sucked into a womb, they don't just go from the ancestral realm directly into a womb. For us, as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, we're drawn up to Nyamewa, and they assign a Okra to us, a divinity. They direct that divinity. You go dwell and install yourself in the head of this person. So in your head region, your spirit body in the head region, just like your physical body has a brain, an organ in the head region, your spirit body has a spirit brain in the head region, and that is the Okra. Nyamewa directs that Okra. Go install yourself in the head of that person and dwell with them throughout their lives. I'm going to encode with you the function they are to execute, and you feel that force in your head. Now, everybody receives a Okra. All Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people receive a Okra. However, out of those 11 Kradim Bosom, your Okra is sent through one of them. So your Okra was sent through the Great Mother Offset, and your Okra is a child of her. So it went through her, and it's, infused with her energy. So your Okra is like a little mini Offset, a mini Ajua, because it came through her. So your Okra is the child of Ajua. She's great. Like, if you looked at it physically, like the moon, imagine the moon giving birth to 1,000 little moons, and one of them is your Okra. You have a little moon in your head region. So your Okra is a child of Nana Ajua. When the Supreme Being directed your Okra to go dwell in your head region, it directed the Okra, or directed Nana Ajua, infused this Okra with your energy. She infused that Okra, that little sphere of energy, with her energy, that little sphere, that little ball of energy. She infused it with hers, that bluish, silverish energy of the moon and so forth. And once she infused it with hers, then she sent it and installed it in your head. So now your Okra is Ajua. Her name is Ajua. Your Kradim, your soul's name is Ajua. It's like my soul's name is Kwesi, is the servant of Awusi. My soul is a divinity, and he is a child of the great Awusi. Your soul's name is Ajua, but she's named after the great mother Ajua, who is Offset. And if somebody was born on Benada, their soul is Kwa, Benad, their male, because it's a child or servant Kwa of the great divinity Bena, who is actually Ogun in Yoruba and Benan Akan. So, therefore, you have a Okra, which is infused with the energy of Nana Ajua, Offset. So your Okra can be called Offset or Ajua as well, because she is a child of Ajua. She's a child divinity of the great one. And you feel her pulling you in your head, certain thoughts and intentions and actions, and helping you to repel other
All
kinds
right.
of thoughts.
Well, I completely, because sometimes, coming from the Yoruba cosmology and the Vodun cosmology, it's like, okay, you're head Orisha. But in this case, this is actually very good for me to know, because in that particular aspect, especially when it being so dominated by, Yoruba-loving priests, they just like, oh, you're Ori. But the actual matter is that your Ori has an identity, and this is something that, is not really taught or understood in the way that African spirituality is practiced in the West. The Ori is taught like some energy that's just there, and it's your higher self or something, but it's never really explained on that level. It's never been. It's not explained to really anyone really, and I think the reason for that is because, and for those who are listening who are in Orisha or trying to get in Orisha, it's wise to cultivate your Okra yourself, because it's really it's a form of control, because they're not letting you know how to access yourself so they can get money out of you. Because if they teach you how to access your own divinity, then they can't get money out of you, like $50,000 to feed Ogun or whatever, So, when it's not really Ogun they're feeding, But one last thing that I wanted to ask is that if one is not Akan, has not incarnated Akan, I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I would say it's more a comment than a question. I would say that you can still call on that on your Caribbean bosom in Akan, or using the Akan tradition to access and find out what your identity actually is. Correct? Would you suggest that?
Well, what I would say, if people don't know what group they come from,
exactly.
The first thing they would do is establish an ancestral shrine and begin to learn from their great-grandparents who they are first. And then once they do that, they want to tell us who they are. And in reality, most of them, once we began to contemplate about ancestral culture and religion and so forth, they will begin to show us through that non-ritual media of communication, like through dreams and different things. They have been moving us towards, the group that we're from anyway. They make us go online and look at a specific artwork from a certain group, and we just think it's, attractive. And it turns out every time that we went to a certain pages, it would say, if it was phone, that we were always ended up on the page dealing with phone culture, because our Nsamanfo were pushing us towards that. So when we decide to set up a shrine and come to them and say, hey, I don't know who I am, they start reminding us of how many times they pushed us in front of that phone culture, and then they'll give us certain terms or give us certain images and put people in front of us who speak the phone language, or put us in positions to come in contact with that culture, begin to show us exactly who we are. And once we learn that, then we can start incorporating the language of the phone people. So then we'll learn about how do they approach the stay, which they call it the stay, we call it the Okra. And let me say before, there's about a minute left in the broadcast online, so for the people who are on the internet, if you want to continue to listen past 11, you got a minute to call in, to get on the phone, 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635, and you got a little bit less than a minute to call in. You have to call in before 11 o'clock, or else only the people who are still on the phone can hear, but the people just on the internet won't be able to hear. So 657-383-0635, and you got like a half a minute to call in. Okay. So yes. So that's and one of the reasons why. So we would say establishing an ancestral shrine first, learning from your people and being reminded by your people, because they've probably most likely been pushing you towards that kind of information as in some fashion all along, and now they'll be able to show it to you because you're very open to it. And then once you find out, then you'll find out, the phone people call the soul, the divine consciousness, the Se, or the Selido, and you'll use that terminology. Or if people are not, even when they're first setting up their ancestral shrine, they don't know, specifically what group they come from, you can always use the language of ancient Kanit and Kemet, because that is the parent language going back over 40,000 years for the various languages on the continent. So they can use the terms Ka and Kaet, which is, you'll find variations of those terms, just like you have Ka, ancient Kemet, you have Kra, and Akan is the same term in reality. You'll find variations of that term and descriptive titles of that term in the various languages across the continent. So you can use the term Ka and Kaet when you're invoking your Ka or Kaet. You don't know specifically what group you come from, in these recent incarnations, and stimulating, utilizing that language will begin to align you with the with your Ka or with your Kaet. And we have a sample prayer in the language of Kemet that people can download from the website. If they don't know what group they come from, they can utilize that first. And then the Nsamanfo, called Aku and Akut in ancient Kemet, the ancestresses and ancestors who are cultivated, they will direct you as to what group you come from, because that's their responsibility. So you can utilize that ancient language to align with your ancient ancestresses and ancestors, and they would direct you to what ancestral clan you come from. So that's how we would do that.
Okay. Madasipa.
Okay, and Yenyasira.
No, Mate.
Okay, so we just wanted, the other piece we wanted to touch on, like for example, we're talking about different modes of communication. So we're going to go to nkom and the seven senses. We talked about it briefly, but we want to bring up some specifics with regard to that, and then talk about how, again, we talk about experience as the foundation. Before we engage in ritual practices, even before we first begin to learn language and so forth, the experiences we come into the world with is our foundation. Conjuration and engaging the Abosom who are connected to us, engaging the Nsamanfo who are connected to us, based on that communication we've already been receiving and properly contextualizing, then we begin to understand what ancestral religion really is. Then we become centered as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African-centered in the true sense, centered in cosmology. And this, of course, we have the article akom and nkom, spirit possession and spirit communication, the key to understanding cosmology. And it's directly related, of course, when you get possessed by the Abosom or communicate with the Abosom, the forces in nature that undergird all of creation, and interact with one another in a harmonious way to keep creation going, then, of course, all of the cosmology and the stories and everything are reflections of that. So the only way you understand cosmology in reality is when you invoke the Abosom. If you're not consciously invoking the Abosom, the Orisha, and so forth, then you will never understand cosmology. So somebody sitting around reading books written by the Whites and Offspring, or reading books written by Black people who studied under the Whites and Offspring, or engaging with individuals on the continent who are engaged in ritual practice, but at the same time they've been influenced by white culture in some fashion, and they're giving pseudo-philosophies, or they've been influenced by Islam for the past 1,000 years, and that foolishness has infected the culture. So their divination actually a combination of traditional divination and Muslim foolishness, and they're dealing with different kinds of discarnate spirits, and you don't know that because you don't know who these people really are. All of that is, causes a great deal of, misinformation. But when you engage the Abosom who are connected to you by blood through akom and nkom, possession and spirit communication, possession and or spirit communication, then you plug yourself into the actual order of creation. Then you can understand cosmology. And the same thing here when we're talking about conjuration or experience, going back to those experiences we have even from childhood, and begin to recognize and contextualize those experiences and begin to fully engage them because they're inherited, and now we begin to understand what the ancestral religion is. Therefore, when we move forward after that and begin to study language, proverbs and so forth, and study stories and proverbial wisdom and all of that, all it does is enhance what we already have based on our direct experience. If people cannot tell you what their direct experience with the Abosom or with the Orisha or with the Vodou has done and how it has informed their study, their practice, their conveying of information, that you know these individuals do not know what they're talking about. Credentials given by the whites in Narrow Spring based on their pseudo methods of investigation and all that nonsense is absolutely meaningless. It's foolish. The Abosom don't care anything about some silly credential that somebody got from a college, whether it's a black college or a white college. It's like somebody talking about you, talking about what you do and how you operate and how you function and what you like and what you don't like, and then somebody else talking about, well, I've read some things that she, believes and how she feels, and I think she feels this way, and they have this long debate. Then they start writing papers back and forth and studying and investigating what you do and all this other stuff. But they never actually talk about and even write books, but they never actually talk to you to find out how do you feel about certain things and how do you operate in creation, what is your philosophy or whatever. They never actually engage you. They're just talking about you and writing books and producing videos and everything else about you without engaging you. Of course, that would be idiotic for such individuals to say, I'm an expert on this woman, but I've never talked to her. I'm just reading and writing about her. It's the same thing with the Abosom, with the Orisha, with the Vodou, with ancestral religion and culture, and that includes the culture of ancient Kemet and cultures all over Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnit. The cultures are animated by the Abosom, by the ancestral religion, and the ancestral religion is animated by Bedra or reincarnation. So if you don't deal with the Nananom Nsamanfo directly, if you don't deal with the Abosom, the forces in nature directly, and you can't demonstrate how what they have conveyed to you has informed your analysis of ancestral culture, language, religion, philosophy, and so forth, then you know that individual doesn't know what they're talking about at all. They're just Europeans in blackface. So let's get to this nkom and the seven senses, because some people will like to, just like the whites in their offspring, wanted us to deny what our names are, deny our ancestral religious practices, deny our culture, make us believe we're not Afurakani, not Afuraitkaitnit, not African, not black, and so forth. They just wanted us to embrace white culture. There are other Negroes who participate in the same fashion. They will call themselves African-centered or cultural. They're on the continent, and they'll say, I come from a long line of priests and priestesses, but they do not want you to recognize who you are, what your spiritual capacities are, what you came into the world with. Some people on the continent will laugh at you if you say you have ancestral spirits and you pour libation. They'll say, oh, well, you people up there, you all don't have ancestors. You need to come over here and get the real culture. And some of our people believe that foolishness. And then you have other idiots who study, under the whites and their offspring, get degrees and so forth in foolishness and think those pseudo degrees actually are a credential with regard to talking about our culture. But they can't tell you what the Abosom themselves have said about creation and about cosmology and about philosophy and so forth. So we talked about, in this particular article, nkom and the seven senses. We just go into more detail about that we touched on in the previous article. The Nananom Nsamanfo, spiritually cultivated ancestors and ancestors communicate with us in various ways. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. Each person's experience at his or her nkom or shrine will be different, although there will be similar experiences that we can share. So how do the Nananom Nsamanfo communicate? Do you feel as though you're sitting in front of the nkom, the shrine, and not receiving any information, direction, or guidance? Many have had these concerns and often fail to realize that the Nsamanfo have communicated with them directly. Let's look at the seven senses and how they relate to nkom or spiritual communication. So as we said earlier, we have seven senses, not five. Sight, time, balance, hearing, touch, feeling, taste, smell. The two that are typically not spoken about is the sense of balance and the sense of time. Yet they are both critical to our proper functioning in the physical world through the process of nkom. So you have the capacity to discern the differences of shapes, colors, etc. through sight. The differences between sweet, bitter, sour, etc. through taste. different sound vibrations through hearing, different textures, temperatures, and vibrations through touch or feeling, different aromas through smelling. All of these different qualities have a physiological effect upon you. In other words, different shapes, colors, sounds, tastes, aromas, temperatures, vibrations affect bodily processes and thought patterns behavior. They can also affect disease patterns, healing responses, trigger memories, fears, desires, etc., all of which affect behavior. So you can smell the perfume or cologne of somebody walking down the street, and it triggers a memory of somebody years ago who wore the same perfume. A smell does that. It triggers what's been, encoded within you. Smells can, of course, stimulate healing processes. People have, they separate these things out and create pseudo-disciplines, and they'll talk about aromatherapy or color therapy and things like that, sound therapy, vibrational therapy, these different things. But the key is sounds, tastes, aromas, colors, shapes, these various things affect bodily processes, thought patterns, and therefore behavior. You smell something that, perfume or cologne, something that triggered a memory, it may trigger a negative memory, and then you have a response, an emotional response, and you engage in behavior that's triggered by that scent because it's been encoded and so forth. So the same is true of your senses of balance and time. Your proper functioning in the world daily is dependent on your sense of balance. If you can't sense balance, you wouldn't be able to sit up, straighten a car at work, you wouldn't be able to walk, etc. The sense of balance includes gravitational considerations of various entities, not only the gravitational pull of Asasea for the Earth. There are gravitational pulls. Everybody has an electromagnetic field, as we talked about last night and last week with Ya and Abba or Wachet, Ya and Nekabet, Abba. You have an electromagnetic field. You can have an electromagnetic effect upon people, just like two magnets pulling one another as well as repelling one another depending on the position of the polarity. So when we talk about the sense of balance, it's not just the gravitational pull of the Earth that affects your sense of balance, but also individuals and entities who are around you in connection with you in close proximity to you or further away from you. But your capacity to stand up, walk, sit, and so forth is dependent on your sense of balance. You can't sense balance, then you are falling over and everything else. Your sense of time, including spatial consideration, affects your awareness and even your sanity. You can become disoriented, maladaptive if you lose your sense of time. On a mundane level, you can lose your sense of time and crash a car before snapping out of the tram. These senses, all of them, all 7 of them, are heightened in the spirit realm. When dealing with Nsamanfo and Abosom, these various forms of octave perception are the vehicles by which they communicate. Some have the capacity to see beyond the physical. They are clairvoyant. Some individuals will therefore be able to see the Nsamanfo at the nkom, the shrine. Some have the capacity to hear beyond the physical. They are clairaudience. Some individuals will be able to hear the Nsamanfo speak at the nkom, at the shrine. Some have the capacity to feel touch beyond the physical. They are clairsentience. Such individuals will be able to feel the Nsamanfo presence at the nkom. They may not hear or see them, but they can feel their vibration, energy, movement, and so forth. Hot energy, cool energy, calm energy, etc. They can feel the Nsamanfo touch them. And we've had that experience as children as well as adults. So some people were frightened by that as well when they were children, and some as adults. Some have the capacity to pick up on the scent beyond the physical. They are clairalience. Such individuals will be able to smell the scents, inclusive of energy, of different Nsamanfo as they come forward. This is a powerful form of nkom, a spiritual communication. A certain scent that you smell coming from an entity, a spirit. And you know that's peculiar scent. That means that particular ancestor or ancestress has manifested or come into the shrine room or come into your sphere of awareness wherever you are. Some have the capacity to pick up on taste beyond the physical. They are clairgustance. Such individuals will notice sweet, sour, bitter, pungent, etc. taste feelings depending on the Nsamanfo that come forward and depending on the questions that they ask. They're engaged in spiritual communication. They're having a desire to know something, and instead of seeing a spirit, seeing one of the Nsamanfo, hearing them, feeling them move through the room or pass by them in the room, or smelling, having a different smell all of a sudden, develop this, sense of taste, bitter taste or pungent or whatever it is. And that's a powerful form of nkom. Some have the capacity to pick up on taste. We talked about that. Some have the capacity to experience balance or imbalance beyond the physical. They are what we would call clairequilibrance. The Nsamanfo will communicate with them through this sense. Nananom Nsamanfo will create balance within the individual when they come forth at the nkom. Misguided Nsamanfo, the kind of ancestral spirits were not necessarily cultivated, will create imbalance within the individual, within the spiritual head of the individual when they come forth or communicate. The individual will be able to tell who is who through this form of communication. Some Nsamanfo may make the individual dizzy at the nkom, while others at the shrine, while others won't, etc. Some have the capacity to experience the time-space continuum beyond the physical. They are what we call clairtimiance. This can happen when you are asleep and the alarm clock goes off. You awaken to hit the 5-minute snooze. You fall back asleep and experience a whole range of activities that would normally take hours to complete, only to be awakened 5 minutes later by the alarm clock. The Nsamanfo will use the sense of time, often producing a trance, adai, sleep, suspended state within the individual at the shrine in order to communicate with the individual. The Nsamanfo can slow, quote-unquote, time down or speed it up. Take the person to the future or past. This is waking trance or conscious, quote-unquote, dreaming. You will, quote-unquote, wake up or come out of trance not realizing that you have been at the nkom, the shrine, for hours. These various forms of nkom or communication are used singly or in combination by the Nsamanfo, depending upon the individual who is at the shrine. When such nkom or communication is effective, it is invariably followed in some fashion by confirmation in the physical world through the course of your regular day. Things that you saw, heard, felt, smelled, tasted, balanced, or timed at the nkom will manifest through people who come into contact with during the day. Very often they will verbally confirm what you were given at the nkom. At night, of course, the same kind of confirmation can be given via dreams. Dreams tend to become increasingly vivid as work at that shrine, the nkom, increases. We also note that these various forms of nkom or spiritual communication are also forms of rudimentary divination. As we talked about before, anytime you question or inquire, that's a form of bisa, to ask bisa, or ade bisa, which is divination. When questions are posed to the Nsamanfo, foul sense, taste, feelings, imbalance, etc., are indications that the answer is no, or that a negative, misguided spirit has come forward. For example, in some cases, your ability to discern the differences and read the responses will come as you continue to work with your Okra, the Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo. This is merely a summary of the various ways that the Nsamanfo make their presence known. If you pay attention to what you have already experienced, use all of your 7 senses, and you will find that the Nananom Nsamanfo have been communicating all along, from childhood up until now. Moreover, your awareness will increase, and nkom or spiritual communication will be ever more vivid and direct in the future. And that we had appendage to that, talking about we should note that the sense of hearing beyond the physical can be subtle or overt. Some people can hear the Nananom Nsamanfo and Abosom speak to them audibly. They are very clairaudience. However, the subtle aspect of hearing is the process whereby the Nsamanfo, as well as the Abosom, will plant thoughts directly into your head, your spirit. This is a major means by which the Nsamanfo communicate with all of us. When sitting at the shrine in nkom, thoughts that are clearly not yours will manifest. This is a form of subtle hearing or perception that all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit experience. The same is true of the sense of seeing beyond the physical. While some are very clairvoyant, others will receive more subtle images from the Nsamanfo at the nkom, images that actually answer the questions that are being posed. Nsamanfo will place or plant images, scenes, etc. in the head or spirit. This is a form of subtle seeing perception that all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit experience as well. So the senses of hearing and seeing in their subtle spiritual aspects are thus vehicles for the transmission of information regularly employed by the Nananom Nsamanfo to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, no matter what our spiritual capacities are. Even if you've neglected your spiritual capacities and been scared of them and everything else, there's still a form of communication, very often through dreams or subtle planting of images or thoughts, subtle hearing and so forth, into your sphere of awareness when they're trying to communicate. Other forms, for example, in akom culture, the term for spirit body is sunsum. So you are a sunsum, you are a spirit, and you are animating a honam, a physical body. Of course, when somebody makes their transition, the sunsum leaves the physical body, it separates, and the physical body decays and is buried and so forth, and the sunsum, the spirit, goes to live with the other asunsum, the other spirits in the ancestral realm, for however long they need to do that. But even prior to that, during the course of your life, the sunsum can separate from the body as well. So very often when people are dreaming, the sunsum will separate from the body and travel in the asamando and the spirit realm during the dream state, and then the sunsum will return to the body, so that the person can awaken. So that's true, of course, in our akom culture, just in the culture across the board. But then there's another form of the sunsum leaving the body, and that's not in the after-death state, not during the dream state, but during the waking state. So the sunsum, the spirit, can leave the body during the waking state. And people will have what they call out-of-body experiences, whether it's sometimes when people are asleep, from the time you're children to adults. Your sunsum leaves the body, and then you will be able to look down and see your body laying in the bed. And children have those experiences and don't even realize that this is a spiritual experience. They just think it's a normal thing that everybody has, and people do have that, and they think nothing of it and will raise that issue years later. Sometimes when people are being tortured or suffering a great deal and they're going through a lot of pain because of the nature of their spirit, their sunsum will seek to, escape that and will leave the body, and they'll be able to look down on their body while they're being tortured or something like that, and eventually the spirit will get back inside of the body. Now these things, that's in a situation where the people are not controlling that energy. But of course you cannot control your spirit body when you become grounded. You become grounded by aligning with your Okra on a regular basis, your Okrawa, aligning with your Nsamanfo, cleansing your Okra, Okrawa, and so forth. That's how you become aligned and grounded, so your sunsum is not just pulled in different directions. You don't want to be engaged in a situation where your sunsum can easily, you have a light sunsum, your sunsum is not like a person with a heavy sunsum yeduru, the sunsum is heavy, powerful, strong, has weight, and they're unmovable and so forth. But if it's a light sunsum, people can be pulled in different directions, influenced by other negative, discarnate asunsum and so forth. People's sunsum is pulled and they leave their body for one reason or another. They engage in out-of-body experiences or astral projection and so forth, and another sunsum takes up residence and possesses the person, and the people just in their sphere of influence are saying, why is this person acting crazy and acting out of sorts and so forth, because that's not the individual. Their spirit possession is taking place, but it's not honorable ancestral spirit or one of the Abosom, it's a discarnate wayward type entity. So when you become strong, however, you can easily repel that kind of thing, just like you can, when you're physically strong, you can repel negative bacteria via your immune system, and it can't get in to control your body and make you sick and make you swell up and make your ankles swell up and everything else. Your immune system protects you from that as long as you're strong and grounded. But if you compromise your immunity, then the bacteria can get in your body, take over your body, knock you out, and you're laid out in the hospital bed or laid out in your bed and you're suffering and sick and everything else because the bacteria got in and stayed. The same thing is true of discarnate asunsum getting into your physical body spiritually. If you allow them in because your spirit is light, so to speak, then you can come in contact with all kinds of problems. So we engage in washing the kra out the soul, cleansing the head and so forth, so that we remain strong, but we remain connected, grounded, anchored with the Abosom we are born into the world with, and the Nsamanfo who we came into the world with. It's based on that family structure. When people try to pull you outside of that family structure and try to say, no, you need to follow this spirit that we're giving you in this little shrine we're giving you, and you need to do this and you need to do that. Again, you're dealing with, on one hand, sometimes you're dealing with people who are just ignorant because they've been misinformed, and it is very important to understand that because of the negative influence of Christianity as well as Islam in Western Central Afuraka, Afuraitkaitnit over the past 1,000 years, many people have incorporated that perversity into the culture, woven it into the fabric of the culture, and now it looks like the way the culture is displayed, it looks traditional. But then you don't realize that Islamic foolishness has been inserted over centuries, and people are not really dealing with actual forces in nature. They're dealing with dead criminal-type spirits. Sometimes the criminal spirits of those dead Muslims who are trying to brainwash people in life, and they're still trying to brainwash people in death because they're criminals, and passing them off as divinity, and they're giving all kinds of negative advice, idiotic advice, trying to get money out of people and sacrifices out of people and all kinds of ridiculous behavior. And people are passing this foolishness off as ancestral culture. And when you say, well, I'm just going to deal with my Nsamanfo of my family and the Abosom that came into the world with me, or the Orisha came into the world with me, they try to stop you from that and say, no, you cannot do that. You must come up under us or else. And they give you all these kinds of threats, and you're going to die, you're going to suffer, and anything that happens to you, they'll say, well, it's because you're not following what we're saying. Some people are out of ignorance, but then a lot of them are criminal, have been criminal via transcarnationally criminal, trying to control what our people are doing. Some of them see us as inferior or ignorant and not in connection with any forces in nature, and the only way we can connect is to connect with them. That's all nonsense. When you get grounded through your family Abosom that were assigned to you pre-incarnation, you realign with Inyame, the great mother and great father, and you have a foundation to rebuild your spiritual practice from your own ancestral clan roots, your Abusia, your clan family root. And then, of course, you reintroduce that to your living family members and people who are connected with you and reestablish that real culture. The culture, again, comes from the Abosom themselves, the way they interact and interface in creation and establish order in creation and perpetuate order in creation. When we align with them, now we're in harmony with the order in creation. And when we replicate that order in our own society and within our own community, now we have replicated divine order within the community. Now we have a culture rooted in divine order. And the Abosom will possess periodically to replenish that order that we've established in the community. And the Nananom Nsamanfo will possess and communicate to continue to guide that order and perpetuate that order and the protocols that keep that order moving in the right direction on a consistent basis. So this is what we do. And just finally, even with regard to the Sum leaving the body, not only after death, not only during the dream state, but also, during the waking state, when people are grounded, then that capacity to engage in that kind of spiritual communication and operation has been utilized with great effect. When they talk about Nana Araminta, or so-called Harriet Tubman, falling into epileptic fits, and then when she will wake up, then she would know which ways to guide the people. Not epileptic fits. She's being possessed by Abosom, being possessed by Nsamanfo. When she comes out of that possession, she knows directly which way to go to free the people and lead them to freedom without being caught and captured by the whites and offspring who are following them. But someone like that would get possessed and their spirit would separate from the body. Just like your spirit can separate from the body and you're looking down at your physical body laying in the bed, or looking down, if you're in a car, or if you're in a home and you're looking down from a bird's eye view at the home. Well, Nana Araminta's spirit body separates from the physical body, and she can look down from a bird's eye view over the forest in the savanna regions and see where are the whites and their offspring. What direction are they coming, trying to capture our people? You can see them coming in a certain direction, and then she can direct her people to move in the totally opposite direction. And therefore, once the spirit gets back into the body, then she says, we need to go in this direction. I saw where they were coming from. We need to go over here. When the whites and their offspring spend all that time going in a totally opposite direction, the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, they are already out of the area, and they're already free, and the whites and their offspring can't figure it out. So that bird's eye view allowed us to free ourselves from enslavement, allowed us to see when they were trying to attack, when they were marshaling their forces, if we needed to move one of our settlements, our independent, sovereign, maroon-type settlements, or Kufo settlements, warrior and warrioress settlements, we need to move them, or how we need to protect them. That kind of thing allowed us to do so. Even going back further, the fact that we could, before cartography came into place, before we circumnavigated the continent thousands of years ago, which our people did that first before the whites and their offspring ever did, the way we're able to see the shapes of continents. It's no different than the spirit leaving the body to look down upon the body, or look down upon the house that the person is in, or look down upon the forest area where the people are escaping. They can go back further, of course, and see the shapes of the continent, just like you can see on a satellite picture the shapes of the continent. And then we can incorporate the shape of Afuraka, Afuraikai, in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphs and so forth, which we did, and other shapes of continents and other shapes of just, topographical features of the landmass that we were in. We had a different vantage point. Cartography and things like that would come later. So we use these different things. Those are just two examples of how we use that spiritual capacity to great effect. Protect ourselves, to free ourselves and so forth. Also to map out where we're living, even to see where, deadly animals were at, or where they were, coalescing, so we can make sure we weren't in the wrong path and so forth. These spiritual things that we have experienced since childhood right here in the Western Hemisphere, we can utilize to great effect to benefit ourselves and overcome exigencies as well as long-term issues if we are grounded. So first we must recognize who we are, what our function is, how we've inherited these capacities, and begin to contextualize them properly and utilize them based on the function we have been given. So we're utilizing experience, conjuration, attuning to the Abosom and Nsamanfo through direct experience. And that direct experience allows us, it is the key for us to understand ancestral religion from the true perspective. And then everything else that we learn, whether it's language or trustery or proverbial wisdom or certain ritual practices, that simply enhances the spiritual foundation that we already have, but it does not replace that. And if you don't have that spiritual foundation, all of those ritual practices as well as learning language and so forth is absolutely empty and ill-effective. And again, going back to the beginning, if learning the language or learning specific rituals were the key to understanding ancestral religion and cosmology, every single person on the continent will be free and engaged in 100% authentic ancestral religious practice, because all of them know their language and all of them are living in their cultural environment. But the reason why they're still brainwashed with Christianity and white culture and straightening out their hair and lightening their skin and everything else, many of them, because yes, they have certain external expressions of culture, but they've rejected their spiritual foundation that's spirit genetic, and therefore their expressions of culture are corrupt. Same thing happens to us here. If we start off thinking that the spiritual or ritual practice is inferior or unnecessary or even primitive or ignorant or based on superstition and all that. And what you really need to do is get to the science and get to the language and the linguistics and get to the quote-unquote cosmology and begin to dig into the cosmology. If you don't have that spiritual foundation, you will not understand the cosmology. And you'll come up with ridiculous, foolish interpretations of philosophy and begin to convey that. And of course, we see that all over the community. We've seen that for decades all over the community. People who claim to be Afrocentric or culturally grounded constantly misinforming our people because they've rejected that spirit genetic foundation that they were given. They put that to the side, and they have a Eurocentric mindset in blackface, and then they move forward to utilize that Eurocentric mindset in blackface to engage in analysis and produce information in various forms, publish print, video, and otherwise that are misinforming our people on a daily basis. So we, of course, easily correct that by re-engaging real culture. Okay, so we have one more call, and then that'll be it for the broadcast. Michio number 5808. You had a question or a comment?
Michio, good evening. Thank you for taking this call. Quickly, since you're talking about experiences and real encounters. When my sister and I were younger, very young, we were playing on the steps in our house, and we would pretend we were Wonder Woman and jump down the stairs, and we both felt, even as adults, we still remember, we both felt at one point we were floating. And then we found out later, much later, that on those same steps in that same house, our late grandmother, when she was alive, was babysitting an older cousin of ours, and she fell and cut her eye really badly, and she still has the scar to this day. And I understand that our grandmother, felt really bad about our cousin, injuring herself on her watch. And we concluded that maybe it was, our grandmother's spirit trying to protect us in the way that she could, since she wasn't able to do it for our cousin previously. She was a Christian woman, so, she wasn't a spiritually cultivated ancestress at the time, but I don't know if now, these years later, she may be coming through. It's hard to tell what you're experiencing at what I'm experiencing at my shrine. I'm just starting this, but I can tell you that the experiences have changed significantly since I first began. And so I guess my question, in addition to that particular comment and short anecdote, is how do we, I guess the only way to really tell is just by repetition, but, when the experience changes, it goes, the energy changes and the things that we feel and experience at our shrine changes significantly. Can we conclude that it's a good thing, or I don't know how to make of it when when my experience has changed at my shrine.
Right. No, I understand. So, and just two things. On one hand, with regard to your grandmother, yes, like she may have been involved in misinformation, Christianity, and so forth when she was alive. She was still a good person or whatever.
Yes.
What happens is, as soon as they make their transition, what happens, the first shift that happens is they realize instantaneously that Jesus never existed because he's not over there. And they realize
they get there. He's not there.
Right. So he's not there, Muhammad's not there, none of those cartoon characters are there. So that's a shock, you know what I mean, when they get over there. But they know it's real. But at the same time, they're still, they're your grandparents and they want to protect you and they want to do what they can protect. So yes, that kind of thing is common. They will do whatever they can to try to make sure they protect to the degree that they can do so. So that is not uncommon or unusual, or it's not a crazy kind of thing. That is a common kind of thing that they would try to do. That's the kind of work that they do. With regard to the change, the significant change of the experiences at the nkom, there's two things. On one hand, noticing those significant changes and noting those, your Okraa is already directing you to take note of the changes. Your Nsamanfo are already directing you to take note of the changes, and so are the Abosom, just like they directed you to recall the experience and make the connection between your grandmother and you and your sister and what happened with the other individual, making those connections. They were already moving you to connect those dots. And it's the same thing that begins to show you the connection between the shift in the way things were happening previously in the spiritual work you were doing and how things are shifting. But it's still a spiritual, communication there as far as, them showing you or directing you or motivating you to make those connections. The piece that will help to confirm it beyond just the repetition, because, of course, repetition will, the more familiar you become, you begin to really see, okay, this is how they operate, and sometimes you will be able to see them or feel them more clearly or see them more clearly or experience them more clearly, but the confirmation comes physically as well. So they'll put people in front of you physically that will answer the questions that you had or confirm messages that you were feeling or sensations or inclinations you were feeling that may have been coming from the shrine as far as you could see, but you weren't sure. And then they'll put somebody in front of you physically to confirm that, or they'll direct you to information, even if you were looking for something else online and you get directed to a certain page and it spells out everything they were directing you to at the shrine, and it gives you that physical confirmation. So that helps as well. So when you begin to rack up those physical confirmations in detail, event after event after event, you begin to become more confident in the communications that you're receiving and the shift. But then at the same time, the repetition, as you continue, short term as well as midterm and long term, you'll begin to hear them so clearly or see them so clearly or experience them so clearly that you will know even before the physical confirmation comes what's actually going on. You'll be able to delineate that.
Yeah, that has not happened yet. The experience is definitely changing during my sessions at the shrine. Okay.
And that's the way it happens. It's similar to, in a certain respect, when someone first begins to work out, the first thing that happens is one day they're sore, but you couldn't, work out 2 days in a row and then look in the mirror and you're not cut up and perfect and everything else. But if you continue to go incrementally, every time you work out, you are strengthening yourself. You are forging that, strength. You're, toning your muscles every time you do it, even though it's not apparent for the first few days. So a week passes, 2 weeks passes, 2 weeks pass, or 3 weeks pass, and then you begin to notice outwardly the actual work that's been done every single day, inwardly with the muscle fibers and everything else, and you will notice the difference as long as you are consistent. But if you stop and do it 1 day or 2 days and then go 5 days without working out and then work out 2 more days and go 5 days without working out, then 3 months later you'll be the exact same space you were when you first started, because you have to be consistent when you're working out or else it's not going to happen. It's kind of similar with the shrine. You want to be consistent with regard to the schedule that you establish with your Nsamanfo, whether it's every other day or if it's Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday, or if it's Monday through Saturday, whatever schedule that you establish with them, as long as you're consistent with the schedule that you all establish, then that consistency will pay off in the sense of more clear receptivity in these various, non-ritual media of communication that we were talking about, like clairvoyance, clairsentience, whatever mode or combination of, approaches they use, it will become more prominent, as long as there's consistency.
Okay. Yeah, that's something I have to do, is be more consistent for sure. Well, thank you for answering my questions and for entertaining my little story.
Oh, no, we appreciate it. So, Medase for the call. So, that was our last call. So, once again, Yedase, we thank everyone for tuning in, who stayed on the phone line, who jumped on the phone line before it was time for the internet portion to cut off. We will be back on tomorrow for Egua Marketplace. We'll be talking about our akom economic development model. We'll be sending out a notification for that. We are also, for those who are unaware, we have 16 books that we have published. All of the ebook versions of our books are free downloads from our website, and those are the full books. And then we also publish the softcover versions. They range between $8 and $11. So you can purchase those if you're interested. You can read the free version if you like what you read. If you'd like to support the work that we are doing, you can make a purchase of the softcover versions. Any purchase of 10 books or more is automatically 30% off. So those larger orders, some people will order the whole 16-book set, or they'll order the first 10. And the first 10 books, for example, $66 for 10 books, so that's 30% off. So any order of 10 books or more is 30% off automatically, but the books themselves individually range between $8 and $11, and we have 16 right now, and we are working on more publications. So again, Yerase, if you'd like to support the work that we are doing, please check out the softcover publications on the Nhoma page on the website, the publications page on the website. Follow us on Twitter. We are Ojirapo on Twitter. Follow us and please subscribe to us on YouTube. We are Ojirapo on YouTube, and we post a number of videos on YouTube, including these broadcasts. Some of these broadcasts, we don't have all 101 or 2 of them out there, but some of them we do, and we will continue to post more. When you subscribe, then whenever we have a new video posted, you'll be automatically notified. So subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter as Ojirapo. Instagram, we are Afuraka. And then on Facebook, we are Afuraka.Afuraitkaitnit. So friend us on Facebook as well. We have a Facebook group, Akanko Nanasom on Facebook. That's our group. And we also finally have Afuraka-Afuraitkaitnit.ning.com, our own private social network that we own and pay for, separate from Facebook and the other social networks, where people are studying this information, networking from around the world and so forth, posting forums, discussions, and blogs and videos and everything else. So you can join that. The link for that is on our regular webpage, Ojirapo.com, ODWIRA, F as in free, O.com, Ojirapo.com. So, Yedase, we thank you for tuning in once again, and Yebeshia Dio, we will meet again. What's up?